Hey guys. This is part 2 of What If Naruto Was Trained by Tobarama. Since I made the video longer than usual, this will cover until the latest chapter. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 15, Crimson Eyes 3. Itachi's gaze fell on their prisoner. We should make sure to secure him first, though. Shui crouched down to relieve the agent of his gear. He had a torch, too. I think it rolled over when I knocked him out. Itachi looked around and finally found it a few steps away. I have it. He switched it on. It is still working. Good, Shui answered and handed Naruto the man's ninja wire. Naruto looked at him in confusion. Shui grinned. We haven't covered how to tie up people yet, so we might as well use the opportunity to practice. Start by twisting his arms behind his back. Naruto knelt down and followed his instruction. Like this? Yes, Shui agreed. Now use the wire and wrap it around his wrist. Tighter, Itachi corrected him calmly. Remember, you are securing an enemy operative. Make sure not to cut off the blood circulation, Shui added. Good, now the feet. Shui leaned down to check over Naruto's work and nodded. That should be tight enough. Not bad for your first try. Indeed, Itachi agreed. He stepped closer and crouched down next to their captive. Shui switched his torch to his other hand and kept it steadily pointed at the man as Itachi patted down the agent's body with practiced ease. It was when he reached the man's flank jacket that he found something interesting. He carefully extracted the item out of the pouch. It was a key. It appears our suspicions were correct, Itachi told his companions, and held his discovery up. This agent was on a mission. The question is he really a guard? If yes, what was he guarding, and why was he placed here? What do you mean? Shui stopped in his inspection of the key in Itachi's hand to look at him. Don't you think it is strange? Itachi inquired. Danzo apparently went to great lengths to hide something. But then he places a guard inside a room without an obvious entrance. Why draw attention to anything at all if everyone who stumbles across this place might just leave it again, without discovering anything? Shui narrowed his eyes. Now that you mention it, it is strange. You think it might be a trap? Itachi inclined his head. The possibility is there, and if it isn't? Naruto injected and looked between his two friends. Maybe he wasn't guarding anything, and we just surprised him doing whatever? His two older friends sent him approving looks. A valid objection, Itachi agreed, finally standing up again. And a possibility we need to consider, too. Shui nodded and rose to his feet. Naruto sighed and slumped slightly. That's so troublesome. Shui snickered at his word choice, and Itachi smirked slightly. It seems you made quite a bit of headway. Naruto's eyes brightened when he heard the familiar voice next to him. His Gigi had returned. The ghost gave his charge a quick once-over and nodded in satisfaction when he could not see any injuries. Naruto jumped up and unconsciously moved closer to the man. I have scouted a bit ahead, Tobarama informed him. The area has changed since the last time I have been here. This tunnel, for example, is entirely new. I believe it is part of Danzo's hideout. Naruto bristled and shifted slightly to cover his displeased reaction. There are quite a few pathways surrounding this area, the Night Aim continued. At least one leads into this room. The entryway is concealed. Your friends should be able to discern if it is behind a genjutsu or if it has been camouflaged by common means. Before that, however, I suggest you deal with your prisoner. Naruto looked at the tied-up root operative. What should we do with him? Itachi extended his hand towards his best friend. Shui, your prisoner scroll. Shui raised his eyebrows. Why do you think I have one? Because, Itachi answered drily, I know you were on patrol yesterday, and you are always too lazy to empty your pockets. Oi. That's not true. Shui shot back. I empty my pockets. Sometimes. Of course, Itachi agreed amicably. It only took you 3 months to unpack your desert equipment after you had returned from Suna. Now stop squabbling and get onto it. Yes, Taicho, Shui answered sarcastically and tossed the scroll at Itachi. Itachi caught it with a smirk and sealed the root agent away. Now that we have taken care of this, we should focus on finding the key's counterpart. He paused, before adding, it is truly inconvenient that we do not have enough flashlights. I'll just stick to one of you, Naruto answered. You see more clearly, anyway. Itachi inclined his head. Very well. Shui and Itachi spent the next few minutes systematically scanning the room, while Tobarama used the opportunity to instruct Naruto on camouflage techniques. If you want to hide something in plain sight, you need to make sure that it blends in with your environment. A tree is best hidden inside a forest. Before you start hiding your tree, however, you need to consider its accessibility. The more often you have to visit it, the easier the access to it should be. If you have to visit it every day, it would be very inconvenient if you needed several hours just to reach it. Naruto nodded inconspicuously. It made sense. He always made sure his instant ramen was well hidden but easily accessible, or, at least, he tried to, because for some reason, his GG always found the hiding places and ended up confiscating his cups. Tobarama's hand landed heavily on his shoulder, and Naruto's wandering mind immediately refocused on the current task. The ghost gave him a pointed look, making it clear that he was completely aware of Naruto's short inattentiveness. Focus, child, he chided softly and gestured at the wall in front of them. Look around, try to apply my example to your current situation, and remember your opponent is a shinobi. Naruto nodded. It was Itachi who finally found it. The keyhole might have not been hidden under a genjutsu, but the Sharingan's sight was still way sharper than that of a normal human. That was why he had easily seen that something was not quite right with a certain part of the floor. There was a small hole at the conjunction between the ground and the wall, its sharp, clear form carved too cleanly into the stone to be natural. Itachi signaled his friends over. Sure, Naruto. I have found it. His companions immediately joined him, and 4 pairs of eyes surveyed the small hole. Cool. Naruto grinned. So, what now? Sure crouched down to inspect it. It looks like some kind of mechanism. I believe that turning the key will trigger it. We should see if we can't spot more irregularities around this. Next to Naruto, Tobarama suddenly stiffened. I can feel a chakra signature behind this wall. It is approaching us quickly. Naruto reacted immediately. Someone is coming. We need to hide now. The 2 Uchiha threw him confused looks, but the urgency in his voice must have been convincing enough for them to heed his warning. His friends immediately grabbed him and retreated into the shadows, just in time to see the wall they had just inspected sink down with a loud grinding sound, giving birth to another tunnel. A shadow stepped out of it, paused at the entry, and looked around. It seemed like it was searching for something or someone. Finding the room in front of it empty, the shadowed figure turned towards the tunnel. A torch was switched on and Naruto could see the silhouette of a masked woman. The root agent stepped closer to the spot the 4 were hiding in. Parrot? Is that you? You know that Danzo-sama wants. Naruto never found out what Danzo wanted because Itachi had moved the moment the agent had come into view. Red was the last thing she saw before she slumped down. That was easy, Sure commented lightly, and nudged the down body with his foot. Oh look, we got a 3rd torch. Itachi rolled his eyes at his friend's antics. The woman quickly joined her colleague in the prisoner scroll, and the 4 congregated around the open tunnel. Tobarama put a hand on Naruto's shoulder. I shall go ahead again. If I come across any hostiles, I shall warn you, or deal with it myself. Be careful and listen to your friends. They have proven to be quite competent. Naruto watched his GG vanish in the darkness of the tunnel. He did not like being separated from him for too long. Naruto really wished they had some way to communicate over the distance, just to make sure that Tobarama was safe. Well, that answers the question about it being a trap or not. Shusui's voice cut into his musings. Yes, Itachi agreed. But we should still be cautious. There might be more root operatives around. Shursui nodded at Itachi. So, who goes first? You or me? Suddenly feeling very mischievous, Naruto interjected from behind. Age before beauty. Itachi smirked and patted Shursui on his shoulder. You heard him. Shursui fixed Naruto with a mock-indignant glare and whirled around to throw a beseeching look at Itachi. You realize this makes Naruto more beautiful than both of us, do you? Itachi raised an eyebrow. I am handsome, not beautiful. Besides, I am going to bring up the rear, so it won't matter anyway, Shursui groaned. You two are impossible. He complained. Fine. Let's see if we can't bring some light to the dark. He picked up the torch again and moved the light cone into the darkened corridor. That was a terrible pun, Itachi commented flatly behind him. No comments from the peanut gallery. The tunnel was different from the one before. The ground was less uneven, and Naruto did not have to worry so much about stumbling over loose rocks anymore. It was also more spacious than the previous one and wide enough for them to walk next to each other. It also meant that they had more ground to cover now. In response, Itachi and Shursui had shifted slightly in their positions. The three of them were now walking offset in a diagonal line instead of a chain, the two older shinobi careful to keep the youngest between them. Their new formation also had the advantage of allowing them better sight because their line of vision was now unobstructed. It had been quite challenging to walk in a single line when only the first person had been in possession of a torch. Now that everyone had their own light source, moving about was a lot easier. Naruto's gaze wandered over the gray stones surrounding them. Somehow it seemed more solid and smooth than the kind of stone he had seen in the previous room. The walls are made of cyanite, Itachi told Naruto quietly when he saw the young boy curiously eyeing the stone wall. It is very durable and therefore often used in construction. The fact that someone has made the effort to smoothen the stone proves that this tunnel is intended for a more permanent use. It's probably part of an underground base, Shui chimed in. We should be more careful from now on. So, no loud and passionate singing, he added jokingly. Itachi threw a flat look at the back of his head. Sound advice from the one whose singing could be weaponized. I suggest you disregard your own advice once we make enemy contact. On a second thought, please don't. You might disenable your allies too, Shui bristled, and Naruto's shoulders shook in silent laughter. Joke aside, Itachi added, serious again. It would be best if we refrain from speaking for now, Shui frowned. How are we supposed to communicate then? Naruto does not know the sign language. Actually, Naruto interjected, drawing his friend's attention. I do. For a moment, the two Uchiha just stared at him, then Shui sighed. I don't even know why I am surprised anymore, he muttered. Fine. Signing from now on. Itachi nodded once, and they moved on. The area slowly became brighter, and they saw a soft light flickering in front of them. They stopped almost at the same time. Shui exchanged a serious look with Itachi. Scout. Itachi signed. Shui nodded once and turned towards Naruto, making the sign for clone. Naruto nodded once and immediately made a hinged copy of himself. Itachi nodded in approval when the rats scurried around the corner. There was a long moment of silence until Naruto's clone dispelled, and he gave his friends the all-clear sign, followed by the signs for permission and speech. Shui and Itachi nodded in confirmation. And Naruto immediately reported his clone's findings. The tunnel ends at a door. A metal one. It looks like one of those you'd find in a hospital. There was nobody around. His friends exchanged a serious look. A door that looks like one in a hospital, huh? Shui repeated grimly. Do you think what I think, Itachi? Yes, Itachi answered. It sounds like we might have found an underground laboratory. Do you think it could be one of Orochimaru's? Shui looked rather pensive. Itachi narrowed his eyes. Perhaps. But if this were the case, the implications would be rather grave. Shui nodded. Well, there's only one way to find out, right? Indeed. Chapter 16, Crimson Eyes 4. The door looked exactly the way Naruto had described it, massive and heavy. The three friends stepped closer and examined the unblemished metal plate that had been affixed to it. Restricted area entry only for authorized personnel. The two Uchiha exchanged a short look of silent agreement, and Naruto suddenly found himself behind Itachi as the two older boys flanked the metallic entryway. Shui activated his Sharingan and carefully scanned over the door, before turning around and signing chakra and symbol. Itachi raised his hands and formed the sign for sound. A short moment passed before Shui sent him a negative back. Itachi signed his affirmation, and Naruto took this as his cue to step around him. He squinted at the point Shui was indicating and scowled when he realized that he was not tall enough to read it correctly. He turned towards Shui and extended his arms. Shui blinked at his action and Naruto pointed at the door, signing high, and then at himself, grudgingly forming the sign for short. A smirk grew on Shusui's face when he realized his problem. He threw a very amused glance at his best friend, who returned his look with equal amusement, and easily lifted the boy up. Naruto shifted slightly in his grip and leaned forward to inspect the engraved symbol. Noise cancellation. His Gigi had mentioned something about it being one of the seals protecting the ledge. It was a main component of secrecy barriers. Naruto looked at Itachi and signed speak, safe, and permission. Itachi took one look at his serious face and nodded once. It's a noise cancellation, Naruto informed his friends. They won't hear us inside. Noise cancellation, huh? Shui muttered grimly and gently sat Naruto down again. That means whatever happens inside must be done without outside disturbance. Indeed, Itachi agreed. That would explain the guards we have encountered. 2.So, Naruto asked, looking between both of them. How do we get inside? Shui grinned. Watch closely, he told him cheerfully. This is a very useful skill to have. Naruto scooted closer and watched curiously as Shisui made short work of the lock, while Itachi kept a close eye on their surroundings. Finally, the lock gave with a silent click and Shisui triumphantly stepped back. It's done. Good. Itachi stepped forward and the two Uchiha exchanged a serious look before turning towards Naruto. This might get dangerous, Shisui warned him, all his previous cheer gone. I want you to stay behind both of us this time. Let Itachi and me worry about the things in front of us and just focus on covering our rear. Okay, Naruto looked at his companions. The joking air around them had been replaced by sharp alertness, and their postures clearly showed that they meant business. It was apparent that he was now in the presence of two ANBU operatives on a mission. Naruto nodded once. You can count on me. I've got your backs. The three exchanged determined looks, and Itachi opened the door. White blinded them the moment they entered the room, and it took them a few seconds to adjust their eyes to the sudden change in light intensity. The first thing they saw were the sterile countertops, eerie, cold light reflecting from stainless steel. The second, the tubes sitting on the counters, filled with a strange sticky fluid. Naruto felt sick. Not because of the liquid, but rather because of what was swimming inside it. Are these eyes? He asked, looking in horror at the squishy floating orbs. Yes, Itachi answered quietly, a distinct strain in his voice. Shisui's gaze wandered across the room and finally settled on a tube that had been placed slightly apart from the others. He walked towards it. His friends immediately followed after him. Naruto squinted at the small label next to the eyes. Example 0 Uchiha Kagami. Naruto recoiled. This are the eyes of Uchiha Kagami. Tobarama's voice sounded grimly behind him. It seems that Danzo has made it a habit to rob his former allies' graves. What a nice way to repay the one who saved your life. Naruto was horrified. I was about to go and look for you, the Night Aim informed him, and put a grounding hand on the child's head. I intended to return earlier, but then I found this. He used his free hand to gesture towards the room at large, disgust written over his face. Therefore, I stayed and investigated a bit further. It might interest your friends that there is an adjoining room containing a few illuminating documents. Naruto threw a hesitant look at his friends. They were still staring at the tube, crimson eyes spinning in silent fury. We need to search this room. Itachi's tone was so cold it could have frozen ice. Spread out and search for everything that might be helpful in identifying the owner of this laboratory. Shisui nodded wordlessly, his eyes reflecting a harshness that was completely uncommon to him, and Naruto realized with sudden clarity that his friends were dangerous. Dangerous and deadly. Naruto almost pitied those who made them their enemies. There's a door over there. He informed Itachi tentatively and pointed in the direction Tobarama had indicated. Maybe we could find something in there? Itachi's gaze followed Naruto's outstretched finger, and he nodded once. I will accompany you. Shisui, will you be alright here? Yes, Shisui answered firmly. Itachi scrutinized him for a moment, searching for any signs of discomfort, and only found steely determination. Good. Come, Naruto. Naruto paused for a moment before he ran towards Shisui, threw his arms around his waist, and hugged him tightly. Shisui froze in surprise before his gaze softened, and he ruffled Naruto's hair. Thanks, kid. I am fine. Naruto nodded into his stomach and dislodged himself. He smiled brightly at Shisui and returned to Itachi, who had watched their short interaction with a fond look. Naruto grinned sheepishly at his friend and the equally amused former Hokage. Tobarama put his hand on his shoulder. I will go and stand guard outside. The last thing we need now is to be surprised by enemies. Send out a chakra spike if you need me. He gave Naruto's shoulder a last encouraging squeeze and left towards the entrance. Naruto slipped his hand into Itachi's and dragged him to the door. Let's go. The older boy followed him willingly, the dangerous air surrounding him dissipating completely. They found themselves inside a small office that was mostly dominated by a gigantic desk in the middle of the room. It had been completely cleared. Not even a single pen was lying on top of it. In fact, the entire office was just as sterile as the laboratory itself. The white walls were completely blank and not a single picture could be found anywhere. The rest of the room, too, was completely devoid of any personal items, and there was absolutely nothing that even hinted at its owner. 4 cabinets were lined up at the wall across from the door, and that was where Itachi and Naruto immediately focused their attention on. In silent understanding. Each of them moved towards the cabinet closest to them, and they started shifting through the folders. For a while, The only thing that could be heard was the quiet sound of paper being turned. It was about 2 folders and that Naruto stumbled over something interesting. What was the name you mentioned earlier? Orochimaru? Yes, Itachi answered, lifting his head from the document he was studying. Why, here is a paper that has been signed with this name, Naruto replied. Something about experiments and ocular improvements. He handed the paper to Itachi. His friend scanned over it. It might have been a trick of the light, but for a moment, Naruto was sure that he had seen a flash of red bleeding into Itachi's eyes. We will be taking this folder. In fact, we will be taking all of them. All of them? Naruto lowered the folder and stared at him. Won't they notice that? Of course, they will, Itachi answered calmly and stared to empty the cabinet. But these documents are important evidence. We need to secure it. How are we supposed to carry all of this? Itachi raised an eyebrow. 2 words, Naruto, storage scroll. Luckily enough, your little shopping trip did not manage to fill up all of it. Naruto grinned mischievously at him. So, you didn't secretly snack a few boxes while we were searching for the keyhole? Naruto. Yes, less backtalk and more work. Yes, Taicho. Itachi threw him the same deadpan look he usually reserved for Shursue's idiocies. They met Shursue outside the door less than 6 minutes later. He was holding the tube containing Uchiha Kagene's eyes. Have you found anything? He asked when he saw them come back empty-handed. A document signed by Orochimaru and 4 cabinets filled with documents, Itachi answered. We have secured everything, Shursue whistled. That's quite a lot. There was not much in the lab itself. Just a lot of eyes. His face was grim. I took Kagene's. Itachi nodded. We should leave now before we get discovered. I have no desire to fight my way out. Especially not when we are in the possession of sensitive documents. I have no problems with that, Shursue replied. This place creeps me out. He shuddered slightly, and the 3 quickly exited the laboratory. There was a slight shift in the air, and Naruto was relieved to see Tobarama rejoin them immediately. The ghost nodded at him and inclined his head in the direction of the door. I strongly suggest not to leave the laboratory unprotected. If Danzo becomes aware of your intrusion, he might decide to get rid of the remaining evidence. Naruto turned towards his friends. We should seal the door. How quickly can you get it done? Itachi inquired, not even bothering to question his ability to do it. We should not linger for too long. He is correct, Tobarama agreed. It would take too much time to walk you through a barrier construction. We will have to adjust the noise cancellation seal instead and build our array around it. It should be done in less than 4 minutes if you allow me to guide your hand. 4 minutes, Naruto repeated Tobarama's answer. His 2 friends exchanged a look, nodded once, and positioned themselves behind Naruto. Itachi and I will guard you, Shursue assured him. Go ahead. They were done exactly 3 minutes later. I am done, Naruto informed his friends, and they turned around just in time to see the door disappear in front of them. Shursue stared blankly at the bare wall. Where is the door? It's a camouflage array, Naruto repeated Tobarama's explanation. It wraps the perception. The door is still there. You just can't see it. Interesting, Itachi mused. His eyes spun as he studied the wall. I can indeed see some faint outlines. Like a genjutsu, and yet not. He glanced at Naruto. I would like to discuss the schematics behind this further at some point. Naruto blinked. Okay, he agreed, slightly surprised. He had no idea how it worked either, but then he could always ask his Gigi about it later. Shursue rolled his eyes. You can hold your academic expert corner later. Now we should really leave. Of course, Itachi deactivated his Sharingan. We should remain cautious. It might be possible that there are more entry points we have not discovered yet. Itachi took out the sealing scroll and handed it to Naruto. Take this in case Shursue and I are drawn into battle, and you need to leave. Naruto shoved the scroll back at him. No, he answered resolutely, keep it. We are going to leave together. All 3 of us. All 4 of us, he corrected mentally, and brushed slightly against Tobarama's arm. The man shifted closer without realizing it, and something tense inside Naruto relaxed again. Itachi eyed the determined child with a mixture of fondness and exasperation, but pocketed the scroll again. Very well, he agreed, but do not take any unnecessary risks. I won't. Chapter 17, Crimson Eyes 5. His friends were tenser on their way back than before. Naruto could understand where they were coming from. They were carrying sensitive documents and, he glanced at the tube. Shursue's left hand was pressing protectively against his chest, a pair of stolen Sharingan eyes. Itachi was still moving gracefully, but Naruto could see the slight tension in his shoulders. An aura of alertness was surrounding the older boy that told Naruto that Itachi was ready to move at any second. Tobarama was staying close to them, too. The ghost alternated between scouting ahead and keeping a close eye on the way behind them, careful not to stray too far. His presence was reassuring, but Naruto still did not allow his focus to waver. This might not be a mission, but he was determined not to let his friends down. If things went haywire, he would be there to back them up in whatever way possible. They stopped almost simultaneously when the light cones hit a solid rock wall. Wasn't the hidden door supposed to be here? Naruto asked and squinted at the wall. Yes, Itachi agreed. He sounded calm. It seems the entry has closed itself. Shursui turned around and passed the tube to Naruto. Hold that for a moment, will you? Naruto put his torch away and gingerly took the glass container. He was thankful that it was dark enough that he did not have to see the contents. It would have been rather unnerving to hold a pair of floating eyes. Still, he was touched by Shursui's casual trust. The eyes obviously meant much to him. They belonged to his ancestor, Tobarama told him quietly. Uchiha Kagami was a good man. Shursui's ancestor. Naruto's grip tightened around the glass. He would take good care of them. Found it. Shursui muttered triumphantly. He bent down to activate the switch, but Itachi's hand on his shoulder stopped him. Naruto. Itachi turned to look at him. You have felt the root agent approach before. Can you tell us if there is a chakra presence inside the room? Naruto glanced at Tobarama. The ghost inclined his head and phased through the stone wall, only to reappear a few seconds later. The room is empty, but I would advise remaining cautious. There are 3 signatures nearby. I don't think there's anyone directly behind the door. Naruto answered Itachi's question, but there are a few signatures around. The 2 Uchiha exchanged short looks. Itachi nodded once. Very well. Shursui, please open the door. Naruto, stay behind us anyway. Shursui activated the switch. The wall slowly sunk down. The grinding sound echoed loudly through the tunnel. They tensed. Itachi's hand twitched to his kunai pouch. Shursui switched his torch to his non-dominant hand. They waited for any kind of reaction. The air remained silent. Shursui exchanged another look with Itachi. They stepped out of the tunnel. Tobarama had been correct. The room was indeed empty. Well, that was anticlimactic, Shursui commented and leaned against the wall. An ominous clicking sound came from below him, and suddenly the ground gave away. Shursui could see the deep, dark hole opening below his feet. Then he fell. Itachi almost immediately flickered over, and his hands closed around Shursui's right wrist. Shursui's weight was too heavy. Itachi's momentum not strong enough. He would not make it. They would both fall down. The realization hit Naruto like a bucket of ice. Not Shursui. Not Itachi. Not his friends. Shursui's head vanished in the abyss. The torch was ripped out of his hand and tumbled down. They heard no impact. Itachi was wavering dangerously now, trembling hands firmly closed around Shursui's wrist. Any moment and he, too, would be swallowed. Naruto tried to storm forward, but a hand landed heavily on his shoulder. Calm down, Tobarama demanded sharply, and trust me. Naruto automatically relaxed into his grip. Suddenly, he felt a weird sensation. Like something cold was moving into him. He could feel another consciousness brush against his mind. His GG. He could feel his GG. Trust me, the man repeated inside his mind. So Naruto did. His hand moved on his own and for a moment, their chakra merged. Sway-tun, sway-ben, the water whip crashed forward and closed around Itachi, pulling both him and Shursui back on solid ground. Naruto could hear their distant voices. His vision was blurred, and he saw something dark moving out of the corner of his eye. It was gigantic and demonic, and it was slowly coming closer. A grotesque face emerged out of a thick, heavy fog. Naruto had a vague feeling of déjà vu. He had seen this thing before. On the very day he had been born. Shinigami, Tobarama whispered inside his mind and ripped himself out of Naruto's body. Naruto stumbled back. The dark figure was still there, but it was silent and unmoving, grinning at them with a mirthless face. Then it began to speak. Its voice rattled like rusty chains. You broke nature's law. As punishment, your soul's fates shall be chained forevermore. The fog receded slowly, and the figure was gone again. Naruto's mind was still reeling. Are you alright? Tobarama inquired. There was an uncharacteristic undercurrent of panic in his tone. Yes, Naruto replied slowly. I think I am good. Tobarama sounded relieved, and also strangely close. It was like the voice was coming from his own mind. Strange, Naruto. Shirsue's voice yanked them back into reality. Are you alright? Did you overexert yourself with that jutsu? Naruto shook his head. No, it's alright. He smiled shakily at his friends. I am just a bit. You almost died. For a short moment, 4 pairs of eyes stared at the dark hole that had nearly swallowed 2 of their own. That was close, Shirsue muttered. I had not expected a trap to be there. We were careless, Itachi replied. His expression was grim and still full of worry. He looked at Naruto. You saved our lives. Thank you. Naruto ran forward and threw himself at both of them. He buried his head in Shirsue's stomach and grabbed Itachi's arm, not even caring about the fact that they were both soaked. I was so scared, he whispered. I didn't want to lose you. Shirsue's arm settled around him, and Itachi's free hand landed gently on his head. It's all right, Rito-chan, Shirsue told him. We are here. You saved us. Thank you. I couldn't have done it without Gigi, Naruto thought quietly. Thank you, Gigi. They would be dead without you. To his great surprise, he could hear Tobarama's voice answer back. Of course, child. But I am worried about the repercussions and the punishment that was mentioned. I only intended for our chakra to merge, but you let me in completely. It should not have been possible, but for a moment, our souls became one and we were both half alive and half dead. I believe this is the reason the Shinigami appeared and why we are connected now. We unwittingly broke an existential law. But this is a situation to worry about later. We should leave now before something else happens. Let's go back, Naruto muttered into Shirsue's stomach. Agreed, Itachi answered. Shirsue, don't forget the eyes. Never, Shirsue replied. It was a relief to all of them. When Itachi's torch finally hit the rundown wooden walls of the storage unit. One after one, they stepped out of the tunnel. Itachi immediately put the torch down and closed the entry. Naruto, can you restore the array? Naruto looked thoughtfully at the inscription and nodded slowly. I just need to wash away my seal in reverse order. Does anyone have water? Itachi handed him his flask and Shirsue threw a handkerchief at him. It was embroidered. Naruto and Itachi stared at him. What? Shirsue crossed his arms. I got that from a client during my last bodyguard mission. His friends still stared. It's not mine, Naruto. Shirsue huffed and threw a heated glare at Itachi. It's not a love token either. I just forgot to throw it away, Itachi snorted. Of course it isn't. Whoever would date you, Shirsue nodded. Exact. Hey. Wait a moment. What is that supposed to mean? Naruto snickered and hastily started to undo his seal when his Gigi's expression became rather annoyed. It was a quick procedure and the last tension left them when they saw the locking array flare up again. They shared a moment of amicable, retrospective silence. Well, that was quite an adventure, Shirsue stated finally. Itachi nodded in agreement. It certainly was. Do you have any idea how long we have been away? Naruto asked. We met each other around 4 p.m., Itachi answered and looked out of the stained window. I would say it is around 1 m. We have been down there for 9 hours. Naruto nearly dropped the flask he had been about to hand back. That long? Itachi inclined his head. About 9, yes. It is easy to lose your sense of time when you are underground and driven by anxiety. Naruto nodded slowly. He was suddenly feeling exhausted. Itachi smiled slightly at him. I believe we should catch a few hours of sleep, and then we can decide how to proceed. Good idea, Naruto muttered. I am tired. Shirsue snickered slightly and hoisted him up. Sleep, Naruto. We will wake you up later. Naruto mumbled sleepily. Night Tachi, night Shirsu. He leaned his head against Shirsue's shoulder. Good night, Gigi. Sleep well, Naruto. Naruto woke a few hours later and blinked tiredly at the unfamiliar surroundings. Where are we? He asked curiously as he eyed the rather sparse interior. The outer parts of the Uchiha district, Shirsue answered, and he flopped down next to Naruto. Itachi and I found this place when we were younger. We still use it when we want to be unbothered. We believe it used to be a communal bathhouse, Itachi explained and joined both of them on the floor. There are a few seals on the doors that you usually only find on the changing rooms of bathhouses. Really? Naruto was instantly interested. I'll have to look at them later. His friends exchanged slightly amused looks at his apparent enthusiasm, before their expressions turned solemn again. We need to decide what to do now, Itachi told them seriously. These documents contain proof of Orochimaru's involvement with Danzo, illegal experiments and attempted bloodline theft. Then we should just give it to the Hokage, Naruto replied, not really seeing the problem. He will know what to do. Shursui and Itachi exchanged a long look. The sudden tension in the room completely perplexed Naruto. Why did his friends suddenly act so strangely? It was Shursui who finally broke the silence. His voice sounded heavy and earnest. Naruto, what do you know about the Uchiha clan? They are one of Konoha's founding clans, Naruto answered, thinking back to his Jiji's last lecture. Their bloodline limit, the Sharingan reacts to their emotions. They feel very deeply, and if you take their loved ones away, they can lose themselves in a path of hatred and destruction. Correct, Itachi agreed and threw him a curious look. But the Uchiha are also very stubborn and resentful when they feel slighted. Over the last few years an unrest grew in our clan, Shursui added quietly. Some people think that the Uchiha clan is responsible for the Kyuubi attack. Rumors spread and people started to shun the clan. Some older clan members think the village has abandoned them. Itachi continued and shifted in a more comfortable position. They feel isolated from the rest of Konoha. A feeling that started decades ago with the formation of the Uchiha police force. There are many of us who think that it had been a move by the Senju to control our clan. The resentment in our clan grew. Shursui took over once more. He sounded both pained and detached, and placed the sealing scroll on the floor between them. So the elders came to a decision. If the village did not want them anymore, they did not want the village either. What do you mean with that? Naruto asked, alarmed by the grim expressions on his friends' faces. There was another moment of uneasy silence, before Itachi spoke again. They are planning a coup d'état. Chapter 18, Crimson Eyes 6. They want to overthrow the Hokage? Naruto was horrified. Yes, Shursui confirmed, and there was something dark in his eyes. That's terrible. Naruto whispered, staring wide-eyed at his friends. But, I don't understand what this has to do with the things we found today, Shursui sighed. Itachi is reporting their actions to the Hokage, and Danzo made it clear that our clan will be exterminated if the elders don't change their minds soon. The Hokage did not disagree. Naruto had no idea what to say to that revelation. He only understood that his friends would die because some old people made some idiotic decisions, and that the Hokage consented to Danzo being bad again and allowed him to kill an entire clan. It was wrong. It was horrible. A coup. Genocide. They feel isolated from the rest of Konoha. A feeling that started decades ago with the formation of the Uchiha police force. There are many of us who think that it had been a move by the Senju to control our clan. Tobarama's mind whirled. It had never been his intention to make them feel like this. The police force had been his attempt to prevent a second Madara. He had wanted to keep the Uchiha away from the front line and still give them an important position within the village. If they guarded the village, there was a lesser risk of losing their loved ones and falling to the curse of hatred. It had seemed like a perfect solution, but he had not thought to take the Uchiha's feelings into consideration. Tobarama had never been good considering the emotional sides of his decisions. He had only ever chosen the most practical and efficient solutions. This was why he and Hashirama had been the perfect team. They had balanced each other's faults. He was Hashirama's rationality, and Hashirama had been his empathy. It had worked, until one half of their team had been lost, resulting in the damning situation they were facing now. The Uchiha were planning a coup, and of course, Danzo was involved, probably stirring things up behind the scenes to get more Sharingan eyes. He really had his hands in every one of Konoha's mud piles. Didn't he? Tobarama's gaze hardened. First, he stole his brother's body, then Kagami's eyes, and now he was planning genocide. This was not the kind of loyalty Tobarama had taught him. This was not the kind of student he acknowledged. He would stop Danzo and get his brother's body back. There was something else young Shursui had said that alarmed him. The village was making the Uchiha responsible for the Ninetales attack. Once again, he remembered the man with the orange mask. It seemed more and more likely that he had been the one who had released the Kyuubi. The question was, why? Why releasing a tailed beast on Konoha? Tobarama had a feeling that the answer laid within the Uchiha clan. But where did he have to look? He sighed. So many questions and no answers. You are not going to die, Naruto's firm voice cut through his musings, and neither will your clan. He was exuding an aura of commanding confidence, and his words carried absolute certainty. The Uchiha are a part of this village. Konoha is their home. They belong here, regardless of what that dusty old man says. There was it again. The fierce determination in Naruto's eyes. The fire that burned so brightly inside him. The unwillingness to give up, even if the situation was dire. Tobarama felt a strange mix of fondness and wariness. Apparently, Naruto was determined to get involved, 2. He looked at the two Uchiha boys, and while they did not seem to be convinced that their clan's fate could be averted, Tobarama could clearly see the gratefulness in their expressions. Then Shursui snatched Itachi's arm and moved. Tobarama watched in amusement as the Shursui-initiated group hug got a bit too enthusiastic, and they tumbled over, falling into a laughing pile. They were an unusual group, the three of them, but they were connected by the same desire. Peace. Tobarama's face hardened as he thought about the trouble laying ahead of them. This was not a situation three children could deal with on their own. They needed a higher power. A higher political power. They needed the daimyo. But they were not in any position to appeal to him. They had no time to embark on a search for any of Naruto's clan members. And the Uchiha clan was part of the problem. In truth, there was only one clan that would hold enough weight on its own. But the Senju clan was all but extinct. Tobarama refused to dwell on that depressing thought and looked at Naruto, pondering over the Shinigami's words. Their souls had merged, and they now shared a deeper connection than simply being of the same blood. It could be argued that they were each a sliver of the other. Perhaps, it was not something he would have normally considered, but Hashirama had not been too far off in saying he adopted the child, and his brother had apparently put a familial claim on him, too. Seeing that he was the clan head, it was as good as making Naruto part of their clan's main family. Tobarama was not exactly sure when he had stopped seeing Naruto as just another responsibility, and started to regard him as part of his family. Had Hashirama been here, he'd probably been able to tell him the exact moment his feelings had changed. His brother had been perceptive like that. Still, he was getting off track. He could reminisce as soon as the problems were solved and his task completed. Naruto. His voice resonated through their newly formed link. There might be a way for us to salvage this situation. But you will have to follow my instructions without deviation. I will do anything you want, Gigi, Naruto replied as the three children untangled themselves. I trust you. Tobarama could practically feel the honesty in Naruto's words. It was both touching and alarming. Trust without question was as dangerous as it was rare. The child might be completely safe with him, but if Naruto gifted it to the wrong person, it might come to stab him in his back. He put his hand on Naruto's head, mentally noting to caution the child about it later. Naruto, there is something I have to prepare. I shall leave you for a while. You are safe with your friends. Tobarama left. Naruto was not happy. It was Itachi's voice that reminded them of the current problem. We should take a closer look at the documents before we decide on anything. Shursui sighed and flopped on the floor. So we are pulling an all-nighter? Great. Well, at least we have enough to eat. Itachi nodded in agreement and pulled a box of dango out of his pocket. Naruto grinned and took a stick as Itachi offered the box to him. So, you have been secretly snacking. Itachi threw a half-hearted glare at him. Weren't you about to unseal the scroll? Well, get on with it. Yes, Taicho, Naruto answered cheerily. Whatever you say, Taicho. I will follow your every command, Taicho, Shursui snickered. Itachi rolled his eyes. You two are menaces. Stop teaching him strange things, Shursui. His friend nodded in solemn agreement. You are completely right, Itachi. You are a way better influence. Naruto, you should follow Itachi's example. The world can never have enough snarky dango addicts. Naruto laughed and fished the first file out of the pile. For the next few hours, they worked in silence, and the floor was quickly covered with files separated in piles of vital, important, and not important. Tobarama looked at the building complex in front of him. He had always avoided returning to this place. It held too many memories. Both good and bad. It was saddening to see the formerly lively streets so empty. He moved quickly through the eerily silent district and entered the house that had once belonged to the clan heads. His study was still the way he remembered it. Tidy and impersonal save for his brother's pictures lining the walls. The only sentimentality he had allowed himself. Tobarama picked up a brush and uncorked the ink, thankful for the preservation seals he had put on it, and quickly jotted down the instructions for Sui Ben before he pulled some of his older research notes out of the shelves and placed them next to it. He was quite surprised when he suddenly heard Naruto calling for him. So they could communicate over distances, too. Tobarama made a mental note to run some extensive tests to find out the consequences of their merging. Yes, child? We are done looking through the files. Orochimaru has really been cooperating with Root to create Sharingan eyes. Tobarama's eyes narrowed, and he left the office. I will be rejoining you shortly. Tobarama found the three children congregated in a circle, still deep in discussion. This is high treason, Shursui looked grim. We cannot keep this a secret. We cannot. Itachi agreed. But the question is, what can the Hokage do? If we deliver these documents to him, it does not necessarily mean that he will act on them. This is an opportunity. We cannot afford to waste it. Shursui nodded. You are right. We can't. Tobarama decided that this was the right moment to cut in. Naruto, this problem should be approached from two sides. In such a delicate situation, it is not advisable to rely on a single plan. Especially since it is obvious that Hiruzen is tacitly approving, or at least tolerating Danzo's actions to a certain degree. A biased leader cannot be trusted to judge rationally. As his subjects, however, you are duty-bound to report your findings, or you will become guilty of treason, too. Repeat what I said in your own words that you am. Naruto shifted slightly, and his friend's attention turned towards him. It was both baffling and very touching that they actually seemed to be interested in what he had to say. How about giving only the files in the important pile to the Hokage? I mean, like Itachi said, the Hokage knows something about Danzo, but he hasn't done anything yet. So, we don't know if he will do something this time. But we have to give him something, or we will be guilty of treason, too. Itachi exchanged a look with Shursui. A valid point. But why the important and not the vital ones? Because they should go to the daimyo. Naruto repeated Tobarama's mental answer. That got a reaction. Itachi's eyebrows shot up and Shursui stared slack-jawed at him. You suggest playing a political game? Itachi's gaze on him was sharp. Naruto nodded. I do. Shursui stared at him like he had never seen him before, and Itachi looked like he was reconsidering everything he knew about Naruto. Naruto had the strange feeling that he just had irrevocably left the intelligent kid category and entered the someone I have to take seriously territory. The idea has merit, Itachi finally agreed, while Shursui was still trying to wrap his mind around Naruto wanting to do politics. But that would leave the question of how to establish contact. If we intend to start an impeachment against the councilman as well known as Danzo, we will need political weight of our own. Naruto paused. Gigi? Tell your friends that you have an idea, but that you need to relocate again to show them. Naruto repeated his words and his friends looked at each other. Where do we need to go? Shursui inquired, finally thrown out of his stupor. The Senju compound? All looked from the gate to Hare and back again. You took us to the Senju compound? They had donned their ANBU masks to avoid unnecessary attention. Technically, it was not necessary because either of them had to worry about breaking curfew. Shursui and Itachi were of adequate rank and Naruto was in the company of authorized personnel, but the three had decided that it would be better not to be seen together at such an odd hour. It would be easier to explain a late-night drill than a casual stroll. Nope, Hare replied cheerfully. I am going to take you inside the compounds. He was beyond curious to see where his Gigi had lived. Weasel regarded Naruto. There was sharp intelligence in his eyes. The compound has been sealed to deter thieves. None who is not of Senju blood can open the gates. Hare placed his hand on the gate just as Tobarama pulled on the iron ring. The gates swung open. Hare grinned at his stunned friends. So, who wants to go in? Chapter 19, Crimson Eyes 7. At first glance, the Senju compounds did not look special, but once one took a closer look, it became obvious that something about this abandoned district did not quite fit. The streets were too clean, the paint on the buildings unblemished, and most doors looked like they had been freshly painted. There was a strange sense of nostalgia in the air. And an aura of faded life shrouded the empty streets like a smothering blanket. In the darkness of the night, it almost seemed like the inhabitants had simply laid down for a good night's sleep, resting their eyes and waiting for a dawn they would never come to see. It was eerie. A sudden burst of coldness fell over him, and Naruto shuddered involuntarily. He glanced at Tobarama. The ghost was standing statue still, his figure shimmering in the moon's bright light, and for a moment, he seemed to be just as detached and waned as a distant memory. A last remnant of glorious days fighting against the gnawing teeth of time. Gigi? Naruto asked tentatively. He unexpectedly felt the desperate urge to make sure that his only remaining family was still there. Where should we go now? Tobarama shook himself out of his reverie when he felt the child's hesitant, mental presence reaching out to him. Follow me, he replied simply and stepped on the path he had walked countless times, a lifetime ago. He did not need to turn around to know that the children were following him. He could feel their chakra spike in wonderment and curiosity. Tobarama absently wondered how long it had been since an Uchiha had entered Senju territory. Even after the founding of Konoha, it had been an unspoken agreement to keep out of the other clan's compound unless being explicitly invited. These instances had been rare. In fact, the only Uchiha who had passed their gates on a frequent basis had been young Shursue's ancestor Kagami. They might have belonged to the same village, but the lingering disquiet their clans had felt around each other had remained for a fairly long time. Tobarama saw the familiar courtyard appear in front of them and stopped. "This is where I used to live. Be careful, the door is sealed against intruders. You need to activate the arrays in a specific order, or you will receive a very unpleasant greeting. I strongly suggest you follow my instructions to the letter." "Unpleasant?" the child repeated curiously in his mind. "What would happen if I did it wrong?" Tobarama paused, remembering the rather vicious defense mechanism he had developed. "Let me phrase it like this, child. I have never been known for being kind to my enemies. Is that answer enough for you, or do I need to get detailed?" The boy's chakra spiked nervously. "No, that's all right. I'll just do what you say. Please be extra thorough, okay?" Tobarama smirked slightly at the quick answer. It was nice to know he had not lost his touch yet. "Certainly," he agreed easily. "I will make sure to give you a thorough lecture on the mechanisms behind it once we are less pressed for time. It is rare for you to express an interest in the theoretical aspects of my teachings." He was fully aware that this was not what the child had meant when he had asked him for being extra thorough. Yet, his deliberate misinterpretation of Naruto's words would hopefully teach the boy to be more careful with his wording. Not only actions had consequences, seemingly innocuous words had them as well, and they were about to enter a playing field where words were going to be the key weapon. He placed a hand on the child's shoulder. "Now listen carefully. Shursui had always thought he knew Naruto. He had been part of the unit that had secretly guarded him until he had entered the academy. Though he had joined Team K much later than the rest of his teammates, and had spent a much shorter time with him, Shursui had still watched Naruto's growth from the distance. His heart had gone out to the lonely boy who had wanted nothing more but to find a friend. Naruto's attempts, however, had always been foiled by outside interference. It was not exactly like the other kids had been told to stay away from him, but somehow the orphanage's matrons had always been on hand to stir him away from the others when he tried to join. If he wanted to go and play with the other kids at the swing, he had been handed wooden blocks instead and been sent off to the corner to play quietly. When he tried to join in on a game of ninja, someone had intervened and redirected him to the empty sandbox instead. At one point, the kids simply had stopped trying to reach out. Naruto had not grown up alone, but he had been isolated. Seeing him move out of the orphanage just before entering the academy had both relieved and worried him, and his unit. It had relieved them because he had finally managed to leave the orphanage's cold care, and it had worried them because he would be living alone at the tender age of 4 years and 11 months. But they had been ANBU. They could only watch and guard him from the shadows, and their protection had been necessary in the beginning. Tempers had been running high, and not many people had been keen on having the Ninetales jailer among their midst. But after a while things had calmed down, and Konoha's general consensus had become, if you pretend it does not exist, it doesn't. A faulty logic, but a welcome one. So Team K's workload had lessened, and they had continued watching as the lonely child developed a particularly brash attitude that had practically screamed, "Please notice me." It had broken Shursui's heart because they had been there. They had noticed him, but they had been incapable of helping him because they were nothing more than silent, invisible guards. And were not supposed to be more than a dangerous whisper in the night. A cold and hidden blade unsheathed only at their Kage's demand. They could not move on their own. Then Naruto had entered the academy, and Team K had been reassigned. That had not stopped them from regularly checking in on him, though. At first, the reports about Naruto's performance had not been flattering. He had been called loud, brash, and idiotic. He will never become a shinobi, one of his teachers had even written below one report. Shursui had been depressed for days when he had secretly read that report. But suddenly, things had changed. Shursui still did not know what had triggered it, but Naruto had abruptly decided to apply himself. His brash attitude had subsided, and he had seemed so much more at peace with himself and his surroundings. The yearning look in his eyes was gone, and Naruto actually gave the impression of someone who knew he belonged. He watched in fascination as Naruto easily broke through the Senju gate's protections, and wondered if this was the reason for the kid's sudden change. Had Naruto found his family? It would explain so much about his change in attitude. To someone like Naruto, who had never been part of something, it must have meant the world, which reminded him just where the kid had led them to. He huffed in amusement. Of course, Naruto would be a part of this clan, and he apparently knew exactly where he was going. Shursui did not fail to notice that Naruto did not stop even once. but lead them with an assured confidence that spoke of the intimate knowledge he had of this place. It was obvious he had been here before, more than once. He threw a glance at Itachi, and the knowing glint in his friend's eyes told him that he had reached a similar conclusion. His suspicion turned into certainty when Naruto marched up a small pathway to a tall building at the center of the area. Based on the position and size of the residence, Shursui guessed it had to be the main house belonging to the clan head's family. He was suddenly feeling apprehensive. Naruto. Do you really think it's alright to go there? The kid turned around and grinned at him, looking completely unbothered and almost eager. Don't worry. You are with me, so it's fine. Well, that was a rather cryptic answer, but at least it confirmed Chursue's theory about Naruto's ancestry. Senju, huh? He smiled wryly and watched as Naruto effortlessly opened the door. So, this was where his Gigi had lived. Naruto's eyes moved rapidly over the decorations and furniture, futilely trying to take in everything at once. He just did not know where to look first. Everything seemed so interesting, and every time his gaze was drawn somewhere, something else caught his attention, and he looked at that instead. It was just so overwhelming. A hand settled on his shoulder and a calm voice spoke up next to him. This is the main hall. During our clan's early days, it was utilized as an assembly room for conferences. While my father was still in charge, this spot also used to serve as a place where he felt judgment over our prisoners. Naruto shuddered as he eyed the intricate carvings on the wall. To think this would be the last thing people had seen before they had died. Your father sounds scary. The ghost laughed. It was not happy. My father was a cold man, unforgiving and set in his ways. He perceived my brother's dream as a weakness and punished him for it, and yet, it was that dream that became Hashirama's driving strength and forged him into the astounding and powerful man he should become known as. Naruto remembered the gentle smile Senju Hashirama had worn in his dream. I am watching over both of you now, he had said. It was hard to believe that someone like him had such a cold father. But then, he was Tobarama Gigi's father, too, and in his unbiased opinion his Gigi had turned out awesome enough. It seems, not only our clan likes to grandstand, Shursue's voice cut their conversation short. Look, Itachi, their main hall is almost as lavish as yours. Itachi rolled his eyes. Really, Shursue? This is the first thing you have to say. Shursue shrugged and turned towards Naruto. So I take it that this admittedly impressive hall was not what you wanted to show us? Naruto snickered, but stopped when he saw the light frown on the ghost's face. Nope. At least, he did not think so. Where should I go? He inquired mentally. Step down the corridor to your right and open the third door on the left side. That is where you will find my study. Naruto pointed at the corridor the Nidaime had indicated. This way. Itachi had not known what to think when Naruto proposed the idea of involving the daimyo. He had already known that his young friend was more skilled than the rest of his age mates. He had proven himself as quite capable for his age, and Itachi had quickly discarded the idea of treating him like his brother, although he still felt an instinctual need to protect him. It had been a tough decision to continue their investigation after they had encountered the rude agent, but they had admittedly been desperate to find anything that could have helped in getting Danzo off their backs. The more leverage they had against him, the better, and Itachi had been confident in his end. Shursue's skills. To be honest, he had not thought that Naruto would be able to contribute much, but Itachi had been proven wrong. Their teamwork had been excellent, and they had complemented each other in unexpected ways. Itachi did not know when his fondness for Naruto had turned into affection. But he would never forget the desperate look on Naruto's face when he had clung to them after they had nearly fallen into the death trap. It had sealed the deal. They had trusted him with their secret, and it seemed like he was repaying that trust by letting them in on his secret. He was, admittedly, quite touched. This office, he asked as he inspected the portraits lining the wall, who did it belong to? Itachi had his suspicions, but he still wanted Naruto to confirm it. Senju Tobarama, Naruto answered, and he sounded almost fond. Itachi turned around and saw Naruto and Shursue standing in front of the desk. An open quartz box in front of them. He joined them and looked at the small item lying innocently on red brocade. It was the Senju sigil. Chapter 20, Crimson Eyes 8. Tobarama still remembered the days the clan's sigil had adorned the end of each official correspondence. He still remembered his brother's annoyed expression every time he had to make sure he did not smudge the ink while applying it. Hashirama had never enjoyed writing official letters. In fact, he had loathed it, and generally it had been Tobarama's duty to revise his communications. Multiple times, because his brother had kept on changing his amendments. The result had always been a logically empathetic letter written in a tone of unpretentious certainty. A perfect mix of their personalities. Tobarama looked at the child he secretly called his own and placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. Naruto, he began in a solemn voice. The jade in front of you symbolizes the might of the Senju clan. Our numbers might have dwindled, but our name alone still carries enormous weight. Taking up this sigil means taking up the Senju clan's legacy, and the responsibilities that come with it. A clan head has to make difficult decisions, and your actions are going to have far-reaching consequences. Consequences that will not only affect you, but everyone who depends on you. Tobarama picked up the seal with his free hand, too focused on his child to care about the surprised gasps his action elicited from the two Uchiha boys. His eyes met Naruto's, and he was pleased to see understanding in the boy's nervous but resolute eyes. If he had even seen the slightest sign of uncertainty, Tobarama would have reconsidered. No matter how useful the sigil was in their situation, his clan deserved a strong leader. It needed a strong leader, and it was his duty as their last head to find a suitable successor. Tobarama would never hand the jade over merely out of convenience. He would rather have preferred his clan to fall dormant than to entrust it to someone unsuitable. It was better if their legacy died out, instead of becoming polluted. Tobarama allowed a fracture of his power to fill the air to give credence to the importance of his impending action, never taking his gaze away from the child he had seen. Stronger men falter in front of him, quivering at the sight of a single raised finger, and yet Naruto still looked into his eyes, unwavering and determined. Tobarama felt an unexpected surge of pride, and he squeezed Naruto's shoulder in both affection and approval. Then he lifted the hand holding the jade and began to speak the same traditional words his dying father had once given to his brother. I am Senju Tobarama, head of the Senju clan. I am standing in front of you, Uzumaki Naruto, on this memorable day. I have watched. I have judged, and I have deemed you worthy. I entrust to you, my chosen heir, the sigil of the Senju, the power of our clan. Tobarama paused for a fraction of a second, remembering the rest of the ritualistic phrase, and seamlessly skipped to the very end of it. May it prosper under your rule. It was both a strange and an eerie picture, and yet, it was incredibly powerful, the intensity of the moment even furthered by the subtle, but strong energy saturating the air. Shui shivered as he stared at the hovering jade and the young boy standing in front of it, unfazed by the silent, suppressing power. He knew chakra could do some strange things, but he had never heard of a clan insignia flying towards someone out of its own volition. It almost seemed as if the jade was eager to greet Naruto. Shui was now utterly convinced of his friend's ancestry. Naruto's back straightened. Shui did not know why, but he was suddenly reminded of the way Itachi usually behaved around his father during formal occasions. His impression was even furthered when Naruto's hand closed around the sigil. I swear I will not disappoint you. The conviction and solemnity in Naruto's voice was startling and more than uncommon for someone his age. Shui followed Naruto's line of sight, wondering what had inspired his friend's fervent words. His gaze fell on the picture hanging on the opposite wall. The Second Hokage was looking back at him. Naruto was making a vow to the first? How interesting. Tobarama felt another wave of fondness at Naruto's words. I know you won't, he answered. I would not have chosen you if I had no faith in you. He placed his hand on Naruto's other shoulder. You are now the head of the Senju clan, Naruto. You will not be able to keep this status a secret for long. Once it becomes common knowledge, you might become a target for my and my brother's old enemies. There is a storm ahead of us, and you are not yet strong enough to weather it. I will remedy this, now even more so than before. It will be cruel and harsh, but ultimately, your suffering will breed strength. Are you ready? Naruto's mental answer was firm. I am. Tobarama smiled. It was grim. I appreciate the benefits of having the Senju name to our cause. Itachi's voice suddenly cut in. But are you sure you wish to do this? The magnitude of the task you are taking up is no to be underestimated. Naruto smiled at him, touched by the concern in his voice. I know. But if I can help you this way, I'll do it. For a moment Itachi simply regarded him silently before he inclined his head in acceptance and appreciation. In this case, it appears congratulations are in order. Yep, Shui agreed and bowed in exaggeration. Congratulations, Senju-sama. Allow me to be the first to congratulate you on winning countless hours of meetings, headaches, and paperwork. Then he became serious again. Being a clan head is not easy, and you are very young. We are not privy to your clan's customs, but we will help you any way we can. Itachi can probably teach you a thing or two, too, Itachi nodded. I will succeed my father one day. Therefore, I am well versed in many duties and customs. Naruto grinned brightly at his friends. Thanks, I would really appreciate it. Itachi inclined his head. Of course. He glanced out of the window. The sun is rising. If this is everything you wish to show us, I suggest we bring the evidence to the Hokage soon. Shursui followed his gaze and agreed. Naruto nodded in agreement. We can leave everything we don't need here. There's probably no safer place inside Konoha. Toby the Night Aim was the one who sealed this house. Naruto silently cursed himself for almost speaking of his Gigi in a familiar way. He was sure his friends had noticed his slip of tongue. It had been a rather obvious one. Usually, he was very careful about keeping any relation to the second secret, but he was getting rather relaxed around his friends. He glanced at Tobarama. His ghostly companion was only frowning mildly, looking more exasperated than angry. Naruto was relieved. A secure place, indeed, Itachi replied, tactfully ignoring Naruto's little slip-up. The Night Aim's sealing expertise is well known. Naruto noticed that his Gigi looked rather pleased. He's the best, he agreed enthusiastically, and brushed slightly against the man's side. Shursui snickered and Naruto huffed. What's so funny? You sounded just like Sasuke when he's talking about Itachi. His friend finally managed to get out between two laughing fits. Itachi glared at him. Not amusing, Shursui. Shursui flashed him a bright grin. But it is, he disagreed. Tobarama sighed. May I remind you that you still have to visit Hiruzen, and that you have 2 captives you ought to decide how to deal with? Naruto slapped his forehead, immediately drawing his friend's attention. The prisoners, Itachi and Shursui froze and instantly stopped their bantering, their gazes falling on the prisoner scroll. Yes, Tobarama replied somewhat sarcastically, the prisoners. I strongly recommend that you do not hand over both of them. In fact, I would suggest you detain the woman since she was aware of the second operative, unlike the man you had captured first. Please relay this. It might be useful to keep one of them to further convince the daimyo. Naruto complied. His friends exchanged one of their silent but profound looks and nodded. Do you have cells here? Shursui inquired. Naruto mirrored Tobarama's curt nod. This way. They left the building. Behind a mighty sakura tree, a little slug stopped its happy nibbling on a delicious clover and stared intently at the jade in Naruto's hand. Gigi? Naruto asked as he followed the ghost down the path. Can you tell me more about the Senju clan sometime? Or your time in general? For a long moment, his companion remained quiet, and Naruto wondered if he had said something wrong. Then he felt a distant flash of pleased surprise mixed with fondness and nostalgia vibrating through his mind. It was foreign and yet familiar. It reminded him of Tobarama Gigi. Did he just feel his Gigi's emotion? Did you feel that? He asked mentally. Feel what? The ghost responded, and turned around to regard him critically. You were surprised and pleased. I felt it. Tobarama narrowed his eyes. You did? How interesting. Perhaps this is another aspect of our newly formed bond. An avenue we need to explore later. For now, we have arrived. Naruto looked at the building in front of him. It was inconspicuous, save for the high walls surrounding the yards. Power was vibrating through the air. The chakra residue is strong here, Itachi commented. Seals? Naruto saw that he had activated his Sharingan. The Senju compound is filled with seals, Naruto relayed Tobarama's answer. Most of them have been placed by either the Night Aim, or the one he had learned the art from. Uzumaki Mido. The Shodai's wife, Uzumaki? Itachi repeated and fixed him with an interested look. And why Mother's clan? Naruto replied, a soft smile on his lips. They were well known for their sealing abilities. Then you are descended from 2 clans? Naruto shrugged. I guess. This is the prison, by the way. He pointed at the building. Itachi nodded. Good. He paused before adding, I believe this would be the perfect opportunity for you to learn how to weave. Naruto blinked. Weave? As it turned out, Itachi had not wanted him to learn a new handicraft. He ignored the still laughing Shursui and the highly amused ghost in favor of following Itachi's instructions. Itachi had been tactful enough to laugh only once when Naruto had inquired bemusedly if they needed to buy some weaving looms. Apparently, weaving had a different meaning in ANBU language and referred to the difficult process of preparing a prisoner for interrogation rather than to the practice of producing clothes. Naruto huffed. Just how was he supposed to know that? He just thought Itachi wanted to share his hobby with him. Still, he kind of understood where they were coming from. Some knots he had to do seemed rather complex. He sighed in relief when Itachi finally nodded in approval and stepped away from the still unconscious woman. Behind them, Shursui was still snickering about weird hobbies and supportive friends. To say that the Hokage's secretary was startled when she saw the three grim and disheveled shinobi appearing in front of her would be an understatement. Her surprise grew even further when she recognized two of the figures as the Uchiha prodigies and the third as the Uzumaki kid who used to hang around the Hokage but had not been there for quite some time. Uchiha Shursui nodded once, but turned towards the empty air instead of addressing her. "We have to make an emergency S report. Code NSE-5. Almost immediately, a masked ANBU materialized in front of them and spoke quietly into his radio. The office doors opened and the last thing the secretary heard was the ANBU announcing, "Jounin Uchiha Shursui, Chunin Uchiha Itachi and Genin Uzumaki Naruto have arrived to give an emergency report." Then the ornate doors closed behind them and the secrecy wards went up. Chapter 21, Crimson Eyes 9. Code NSE-5. The National Security Emergency Code was not something that could be activated lightly. Invoking it usually meant exigent circumstances had arisen. The number 5 was indicating that it was an internal threat, and classifying the report as S implied that the nature of the report was extremely sensitive. It was enough to put everyone on edge. But what was downright alarming was that Naruto was involved. This fact alone gave the incoming report a priority equal to an incoming enemy attack and demanded immediate and undivided attention. That was why Shikaku instantly stopped his report and yielded the floor to the newcomers. They looked as if they had just crawled out of some dusty hole, but Shikaku was not interested in their appearance, but rather in the way they carried themselves. It was more than obvious that they were close. Shikaku could see the trust in each of their movements, in the casual way they breached the other's personal spaces and the total ease in their body language when they brushed against each other. There was a confidence and purposeful certainty in their movements that belied their age. They made a strange, yet fitting picture. Uchiha Shursui, graduated at age 6, made a name for himself during the Third Shinobi War. Uchiha Itachi, graduated at age 7, Konoha's youngest ANBU captain. Uzumaki Naruto, graduated at age 6, jailer of the Ninetales and capable of making countless shadow clones. 3 extraordinary children. All of them prodigies in their own right. It was both baffling and unsurprising that they had found each other. But was even more fascinating was the formation they had unconsciously taken. 1 would have expected the two older boys to take a protective stance to shield their weakest member. But they hadn't. Instead, they had fallen into a pattern that many tightly knit ANBU units used, one that implied the confidence they had in each other's ability to protect their backs. There were considerable gaps in their ages and ranks, and yet the two older and more experienced Uchiha were seeing Uzumaki Naruto as an equal. The slight glint in the Hokage's eyes told him that he had come to a similar conclusion. Report. Uchiha Itachi bowed and stepped forward. Yesterday, around 11 p.m., we found one of Orochimaru's laboratories. The third almost dropped his pipe. Shikaku froze. They had found what? As if receiving an invisible cue, Uzumaki Naruto pulled a scroll out of his bag and handed it to Uchiha Itachi. The young ANBU captain received it and presented it to the third. "We have found evidence that Shimura Danzo worked with Orochimaru to artificially create Sharingan eyes." The third dropped his pipe. Shikaku cursed. This would be a long day. Orochimaru. Danzo. Sometimes Hiruzen was not sure which of them was the bigger mistake. It was if these two solely existed to give him a headache. A traitorous student, and Hiruzen was not even sure what Danzo was anymore. A traitor? The word left a sour taste in his mouth. A friend taking the wrong path? It did not feel right either. He was getting far too old for this. If only Minato had lived, he sighed and looked at the children in front of him. What happened? To his surprise, Naruto was the one who answered. Yesterday afternoon, Shursui and I wanted to eat dango with Itachi. But the people on the street were glaring at us. It made me uncomfortable. So, I took them to the southern end of the town. There is an abandoned store unit I've found. I thought we would be unbothered there. The Hokage felt a pang of guilt. To think that Naruto was so uncomfortable in his own village that he had to hide in some abandoned hut just to meet with his friends. Minato would be appalled. We found a sealed entry there. Uchiha Itachi continued. We thought it led to a cellar, so Naruto unsealed it. The third blinked. Naruto did what? He looked at the young boy, who shrugged. It was a simple barrier array. Not really difficult. A simple barrier array? Not difficult? Hiruzen was torn between amusement and disbelief. Amusement because Naruto had just sounded like Minato, and disbelief because he was sure nobody had taught the child sealing yet. You know Fuinjutsu? How? I have given him a book, Hokage-sama. Uchiha Shursui cut in. My ancestor, Kagami, has learned a bit from the Nidaime Hokage and left some notes. I gave it to Naruto when he expressed his interest after hearing about it during training. The third raised an eyebrow. This is very generous of you, the Jounin grinned. Well, I have to support my little brother. Hiruzen felt his face soften slightly. Indeed, but he was slightly worried. Fuinjutsu was a dangerous discipline and nothing to experiment with. I have to implore you to be careful, Naruto. Do not experiment on your own. I'll stick closely to the instructions, Naruto replied. He sounded uncharacteristically serious. When had this child grown so much? He sighed. Very well. What happened after that? We discovered an empty tunnel, Hokage-sama. Uchiha Itachi continued. We followed it and reached another room with a secret passage. It was open, so we assumed we had simply found another entry to Konoha's emergency escape tunnels. The third inclined his head. Konoha's underground network was rather extensive. Most of the important buildings were connected to it to ensure a quick evacuation in case of an emergency and to move supplies and troops across Konoha without coming under fire. It was the duty of the ANBU to secure it. It was not far off to assume that a storage unit would be connected to it. We assumed wrongly. Uchiha Itachi's face took a grim expression. And the Hokage realized they were reaching the critical part. Because what we found was a door that looked like the entry to a laboratory. An underground laboratory. Shikaku furrowed his brows. He had been part of the underground purge that had followed Orochimaru's treachery. A special task force had been gathered to sweep the escape tunnels. They had discovered 12 unauthorized secret passages and 3 laboratories filled with questionable experiments. The forensic and research department was still trying to decipher their usage. After the search had been concluded, the underground network had been officially labeled clean. But apparently, they had missed something substantial. Shikaku was not surprised. He had always doubted the verdict, but the Hokage had been quick to believe Danzo's words. But now it seemed like his suspicion had been justified. This was one of these times he hated having his thought proven true. In front of him, Uchiha Itachi stopped in his explanation and Uzumaki Naruto seamlessly continued from where he had left off. There was a seal for noise cancellation on the door. I did not get around to getting a closer look, but I am sure it was part of a secrecy barrier. The third's face darkened. Are you certain? Naruto nodded. Yes, I am. Shikaku almost smiled at the boy's tone. The fourth had used the exact same one when someone had questioned his sealing abilities. It was a strange mixture of certainty, nonchalance, and something that Shikaku had jokingly called the Namikaze presence. It was the ability to make your conversation partner feel inadequate by sheer accident. The third's lips twitched. Undoubtedly, he was thinking along the same lines. I see. Proceed with your report. Uchiha Shursui stepped forward to heed the order. We decided to investigate. The third was displeased. With a genin among you? He asked sharply. Uchiha Shursui did not twitch under his warning gaze. Naruto was worried that he had overlooked a proximity trigger, so we decided it would be best to investigate before the owner of the lab was notified of our presence and had the chance to remove potential evidence. Between Itachi and me, Naruto was completely safe at any point of time. Besides, Naruto has not hindered us once, but rather proven himself to be a vital asset. Hokage-sama. We trust in his skills, Hokage-sama. Uchiha Itachi agreed evenly, and his judgment. The Hokage's eyebrows shot up. Uchiha Shursui and Uchiha Itachi were among the best Konoha had to offer. Especially, the young Itachi was known for having high standards. For him to say that he trusted in Naruto's skills and his intellect was high praise. The third felt a distant sort of pride. Naruto would become someone great someday. Like his parents had been. They would be proud of him. He knew he was. Still, he was not pleased about the child being put in danger so soon. But now was not the right moment to discuss this. They had more pressing matters to consider. Continue. The 3 boys exchanged short, grim looks. We went in. Uchiha Itachi finally replied, and we found eyes. Countless deformed Sharingan eyes. The Hokage rubbed the bridge of his nose. And how do you know Danzo and Orochimaru are involved? He asked tiredly. Uchiha Itachi pointed at the scroll on his desk. We found files and a root agent guarding the laboratory. Uchiha Shursui placed a prisoner scroll next to the storage scroll. The third sighed deeply. Very well. Shikaku, please go and get a Biki. After this, we need to gather a unit to search the laboratory as quickly as possible. The three of us offer our services, Hokage-sama. The Hokage looked at Uchiha Shursui. I will gladly have you and Itachi, but Naruto, he is needed to undo the camouflage array he placed on the door. Hokage-sama, Uchiha Itachi interjected, we will not be able to find the door without him. The Hokage was stumped. Naruto was even capable of making camouflage arrays? Just how much had he missed? He sighed. Very well. You three will be part of it. I trust you will look after Naruto. Of course, Hokage-sama. Uchiha Itachi agreed easily. Had the third not known that Itachi was a respectful and obedient shinobi, he could have sworn that the child had just scoffed at him. Shoving that ridiculous thought away, he stood from his chair and walked around to look at the three children. Jounin Uchiha Shursui, Chunin Uchiha Itachi, Genin Uzumaki Naruto, you have done your village a great service. Your discovery will go down in your records as a S-rank mission, and you will be paid appropriately. I am placing a gag order on everyone involved in this. This matter will not be spoken of outside this room. Is that clear? He received 4 yes, Hokage-sama, from the assembled shinobi. Good. You may rest now. I will call you once I have looked through this. Yes, Hokage-sama, the children replied again and bowed in unison. Tobarama scrutinized his former student. Hiruzen seemed tired and weary. It was more than obvious that he was looking at a man way past his prime. There was hardly anything left of the young and determined man he had once been. Time had clearly left its marks on him. Tobarama watched as an aged hand thumbed through the files and caught himself developing a faint yet foolish hope that, perhaps, there was still some resolve left in the man he had once made his successor. On the surface, the third's face was unreadable. But Tobarama knew his student. He could still read him like an open book, and that was why he could clearly see the churning emotions flashing through his student's eyes. Disappointment, weariness, sadness, and disbelief were warring for dominance. In the end, his gaze dulled, and Tobarama recognized the look as the one he had often seen on the faces of his defeated enemies: resignation. This was the moment Tobarama was forced to accept what he had already known. Hiruzen had lost the will of fire. He turned away. Behind the Hokage's desk, the ever-watchful picture of Senju Tobarama wavered, and a crack appeared between protective red eyes. As the new day dawned behind him, Sarutobi Hiruzen was left alone with the proof of his friend's treachery and the shattered portrait of the Nidaime Hokage. Chapter 22, Trinity 1. A lone figure stood at the very edge of a shimmering void, avidly watching the blurred images moving in a distance far beyond a mortal's reach. His face was set in an expression of fond gentleness, and his eyes were glimmering with the unmistakable glow of pride. His posture was calm and relaxed, and he did not even twitch when the sudden appearance of a dark, looming presence silenced the area around him. You are spending quite a lot of time on the verge of these plains, Senju Hashirama. Does it not pain you to watch from afar? Hashirama never took his eyes from the softly gleaming void in front of him, and mutely shook his head. I enjoy seeing their happiness. The slowly strengthening bond forming between them delights my heart. The presence behind him darkened, and a spark of coldness spiked through the air. The living you are watching over violated the laws of this world. Their souls will never enter these plains. The child and your brother will face judgment for their crimes. Hashirama remained unconcerned. You may be the warden of this realm, Shinigami-sama, but even you have to bow to a higher power. The great eyes have been lost. I bow to no one. The dark presence twisted in indignant fury. The ghostly figure of Senju Hashirama stayed silent. There was nothing left to say. He would protect his family, through life, through death, and beyond. When he woke up, he was alone. Alone in a wide, open void. Everything was white. Then the colors emerged, one after the other, gradually fading in. First, they were just blurred, overlapping dots. But the longer he stayed, the clearer the dots became, until he could finally see something like slowly sharpening outlines. The details emerged after. Shades, contours, shadows. He could see them all. Next, the words returned. First came the colors: green, blue, red, yellow. Then the names of the shapes they solidified in: circle, rectangle, cylinder, square, triangle. The objects arrived next, followed by the abstract concept of intangibility. Then it appeared: the perception of being, the understanding of the word I. And with this understanding, emotions returned, and they brought memories with them. And suddenly, he remembered. He remembered everything: his name, his dream, his life, his death. Driven by a desperate urge to find something familiar, he wandered around aimlessly, until he found him, his friend, his confidant. But he quickly realized that something was wrong with him. His friend had changed. He had lost his way. He had lost his kindness. He had lost sight of the true goal they had been fighting for. He wanted him to stop walking this path. He wanted him to remember. He wanted him to return to his true self. But he could do nothing. He was helpless. He could only watch. Only stand by as his friend was swallowed by darkness. As he walked further down the wrong path. Falling for the deceitful whispers of a false promise. He tried to reach out, but he remained unheard. His voice was a silent scream into the void. Nobody heard him. He did not even hear himself, but he still screamed his warnings. For days. For nights. But nobody listened. Nobody could listen. But then he heard whispers about him. Through the souls that meandered too close to the veil. Through the man standing at the very verge of the beyond, surrounded by the power of nature and creation. He had a chance. If he could find him. The one who could hear him. The only one. So he watched. So he waited. And finally, he knew where to go. Tobarama had never been one to waste time. Especially not when it came to threats to the village's security. When Hiruzen failed to call for them after a few days had passed, he had immediately set out to investigate the current daimyo. What he had seen had not impressed him. He had watched the man for days. From as much as he had seen, the current daimyo was not a man who could be described as decisive. Quite the contrary. The man was fickle and prone to change his mind. He was content with the status quo and easily impressed. He was not a man Tobarama would willingly interact with. People like him were easily swayed by nice words and never firm in their decisions. They could not be trusted to make the right judgment. Tobarama disliked this kind of personality. It lacked strength and willpower. People like this were unreliable and untrustworthy, but also very predictable in their unpredictability. That made them both difficult and easy to deal with. All you needed was a sufficient display of strength to sway them to your side, and if Tobarama had one thing, it was strength and intelligence. He returned to Konoha. Confident that his child would be able to deal with the man. He would make sure of it. In response to the current happenings, Naruto's training intensified. It seemed like both Tobarama and his two older friends had independently decided that he urgently needed to elevate his skills. Between them and Team K, Naruto hardly had any time to relax, which was why he had been forced to make a more or less generous use of the shadow clone technique, just like he was doing it now, while one clone was busy listening to Itachi's lecture about proper behavior for clan heads. A second one studied the water whip under Tobarama's watchful eye, and a third pored over the second's sealing notes. The real Naruto, however, was busy with Team K. Lion had decided on putting him through advanced training today. This was the reason Naruto was currently running over a frozen river, trying to keep a leaf on his forehead while doing his best not to make the ice crack. But of course, this exercise did not end here. It went even further than that simple chakra control. Lion's words, not Naruto's, because in his opinion this exercise was already difficult enough this way. But apparently his teammates had a different definition for difficult. Naruto grumbled as he barely dodged a snowball Badger had just thrown at him and quickly flickered out of the way of Owl's snowy projectile. He grinned proudly at his evasive maneuver and promptly missed Parrot's snowball hitting him from behind. Naruto lost his concentration and stumbled. The ice cracked, and he tumbled over. But before he hit the icy ground, he was suddenly wrapped tightly in something warm and fluffy and lifted into the air. Naruto wriggled in the strong grip and tried to get rid of the warm thing, but a determined hand tucked him even deeper into the warm cloth. "Calm, kid, you almost fell in." Naruto stopped struggling and looked up to see who had caught him. It was the same dog masked Anbu who had handed him the tomato basket. And now the man had appeared out of nowhere and wrapped him into a thick blanket. An orange blanket, with paw prints. Be careful, the man told him gruffly. He patted Naruto awkwardly on his head, adjusted the blanket, and vanished before Naruto could thank him. Naruto was left to stand on the frozen grass, looking like a gigantic fluffy cocoon and wondering, not for the first time, just who that dog mask was. Behind him, Team K roared with laughter. Naruto glared at them. "Stop laughing and help me out of this." "I can't move." They only laughed harder. After a highly amused Owl had freed Naruto from his cuddly prison, Lion called an end to today's training. Badger immediately stalked over and threw his arm around Naruto's shoulder. "Sue, a little birdie told me, you, Owl and Weasel got some action together." Parrot appeared next to them and ruffled Naruto's hair. "Our little hair here is growing into a big bunny." Yup, Badger agreed and turned his masked face towards Naruto. So, you made friends with Weasel, eh? Well, I guess that guy is okay, even if he is a bit stiff sometimes, Naruto bristled. He's not stiff. He's awesome, and he makes really mean jokes. If a mask could show an expression, then Badger and Parrot would certainly have looked like the epitomes of disbelief. He is a mean one. Al corrected him easily and dropped the blanket over Naruto's head. Naruto let out a displeased hiss and tried to dislodge the fluffy thing from his head. It was a futile effort since he was still trapped against Badger's side. He's not mean. You are mean. Now get this off me, or I'll hide all your cookies. There was a moment of silence, then Parrot let out a low, impressed whistle. Wow. That's a hardcore threat if I ever heard one. Hair is really growing up. Badger agreed, he can make threats now. He sounded happy and strangely teary. The blanket was ripped off his head and Naruto found himself looking into Owl's serious eyes. Hair, he began slowly, has someone told you that you are really scary? Naruto scoffed. Lion simply rolled his eyes at his team's antics. Terrifying ANBU, indeed, and then he wrapped Naruto into the blanket. It was hilarious. Shursui finished his tale during dinner later that day, waving his arms to emphasize his point. A noodle slipped from his chopstick, and Naruto's hand snapped forward to snatch it before it hit the ground. Itachi raised an eyebrow. Naruto shrugged, looking completely unrepentant, and munched happily on his catch. It is a terrible crime to waste ramen. Shursui snorted. Itachi rolled his eyes and chewed thoughtfully on his noodle. It seemed like Hatake Kakashi was making some headway in showing open care for his younger brother. As an older brother himself, he thoroughly approved of the man's actions. If Sasuke had been about to fall into an icy river, he would not have acted differently. Although, he threw a contemplative look at his younger friend. Unlike Sasuke, Naruto would probably have been able to stop his fall by himself. Who is this guy, anyway? Naruto demanded to know, and stopped in his inhaling his third bowl to ask his question. I mean, he gives me these strange things and then runs off. A valid question, Itachi conceded. He would have been quite intrigued about this kind of behavior, too. Itachi pondered whether he should answer or not. Yenbyu's identities were supposed to be a secret. Leaking their names, a heavy crime. It was strange. Itachi had always prided himself on his secrecy and integrity, dutifully keeping every secret close to his heart, always ready to die to keep it. But somehow, he wasn't concerned with these trifling things anymore. What was revealing an Yenbyu's identity to a trusted person in comparison to their plan to go behind the Hokage's back? Nothing. What was going behind the Hokage's back in comparison to keeping his family, to keeping Sasuke alive? Nothing. Itachi's mind was set. For those he loved, he was ready to become a traitor. His name is Hatake Kakashi. Shursui threw him a sharp look that softened when Itachi looked back evenly. Itachi was sure that he had just seen a hint of happy pride in Shursui's eyes. Hatake Kakashi, Naruto repeated after he swallowed his bite. Itachi was slightly surprised by Naruto's table manners. For someone who had grown up on his own, he was unexpectedly well-mannered. It was one of the many puzzles that surrounded the child named Uzumaki Naruto. Itachi was curious. Very much so. But he had no intention to pry. Naruto was their friend. He had seen the truth in the young boy's eyes. That was enough for him. And no matter how much he wanted to know, Itachi would wait until his friend was ready to confide in them. He shook his head as said friend yelled for his fourth bowl of ramen and absently relocated a small stray slug from the back of Naruto's chair to a nearby flower pot. It was after dinner, when they congregated in the Senju compound, that Shursui offered a suggestion. You know, I've been thinking, I hope you did not hurt yourself, Itachi commented drily and lowered the document he had been studying. Naruto snickered over his sealing book. Shursui ignored Itachi's comment with practiced ease. I've been thinking, he repeated, completely undeterred. So, we are a team now, right? I guess so? Naruto offered and bookmarked the page to look at his older friend. Of course, Itachi agreed, carefully filing the document away. Although, the term accomplices would probably be even more fitting at this point. Shursui waved him off. Semantics. Itachi twitched at the terrible word mix-up. Semantics, Shursui. It's semantics. Do you require a dictionary? There is one on the shelf next to the door. Third row, Naruto supplied helpfully. Shursui threw a cushion at him. Naruto dodged it easily. Schematics, Shursui repeated, throwing a pointed look at Itachi. Anyway, since we are a team, we should give ourselves a nice name, too. Itachi rolled his eyes at the blatant provocation attempt and raised an eyebrow. A name? Shursui nodded emphatically. Every cool unit needs a name, and we are now Konoha's secret peacekeepers. So, we need a name. Itachi rolled his eyes. You read too many comics. Fine, what do you suggest? 2.5 animals? Itachi, Naruto, and an invisible Tobarama stared wordlessly at Shursui. Because of ANBU, the oldest Uchiha elaborated slowly. Animals, you know, they just kept staring silently. The peacekeepers, unimpressed silence. Awesome 3, more silence. Terrifying trio, no answer. Team 7. You know, because of this 7 times rebirth thing? Their stares turned incredulous. Dango gang? Itachi's left eyebrow twitched. Ramen 3. Naruto perked up, but Itachi shot him a very unmistakable no-way look. Naruto sighed in disappointment. Tobarama looked relieved. Shursui crossed his arms in front of his chest. If you don't like my names, then suggest something else, he demanded indignantly. Tobarama threw a look at the 3 children and remembered the one goal they all wanted to accomplish. The one thing that connected them. The one thing that had united them. Their wish for peace. He whispered his choice. Naruto beamed as he echoed the name. Itachi smiled. Shursui grinned. They agreed. Haiwa no Kyodai. The Brothers of Peace. It was fitting. None of the children knew that their random decision would have far-reaching consequences one day. All they knew was that this small act of naming themselves had brought them even closer than before. Make plot compliant. Deep down below Konoha, Shimura Danzo cursed loudly when he opened his office door and a wave of muddy, fall water forced him down and drenched him to his bones. He pushed himself upright and hastily leaped forward to catch the file drawer floating past him. Danzo cursed again as he tried to drag the drawer back in and yelled for his men to aid him. Why, oh why, did he have to build his office just below the sewer? Chapter 23, Trinity 2. Tobarama kept a keen eye on the running boy. Naruto's speed had improved even further, but it was still far from the goal Tobarama had set for him. Of course, Naruto had long surpassed his peers by now and was quickly approaching the skill level of an average chunin. But this was not the purpose of their training. Their goal was higher. Much higher. They were not preparing for an exam. They were preparing for war. The orange-masked man flashed through Tobarama's mind, quickly followed by Danzo's face. Naruto needed to improve even faster. His face hardened. You are too slow, he admonished the child. Take a 5-minute break, and then try again. I expect you to run this course in less than 3 minutes. For each time you underperform, I will be taking your ramen privileges for 2 weeks. As always, his threat seemed to work. Naruto's head whipped in his direction. He looked practically scandalized. I'll do it, the boy immediately declared. His face was filled with determination. I am not losing my ramen. Tobarama remained unmoved. Keep your emotions under control, he reminded the agitated child sharply. If you get provoked so easily, you will lose your focus and die. Your chakra is fluctuating. Sit down and meditate. If I see you move, your ramen privileges will be gone for a month. Naruto froze, eyed the patches of melting snow indicating the approaching end of the cold season, and threw a pleading look at him. Tobarama simply crossed his arms and stared at the reluctant child. He watched as Naruto grumpily lowered himself on the wet green. Circulate your chakra to keep yourself warm, he ordered the child. Keep the flow steady and your aura to a minimum. Do not move. Do not speak. It was an uncomfortable exercise, but it served well as an endurance training. At least it was better than the training he had to endure as a child. Tobarama would never forget the hours he had spent under the cold waterfall during freezing autumn nights. Hashirama and he had been forced to stand unmoving while their father had guarded them from his place by the sizzling campfire. Do not move. Do not speak. Had been an iron rule. Drenched and shivering, time had stretched endlessly. The cold had been terrible. The icy water had prickled on his skin like frozen needles, even though his chakra had kept him warm inside. Tobarama still remembered that he and his brother had allowed the back of their hands to touch whenever their father had averted his gaze for a moment. The fleeting brush of skin on skin had been a brief moment of solace. A reminder that they were not alone. Tobarama had hated this exercise, and the idea of putting the small child in his care through the same ordeal repulsed him. Especially since Naruto would be completely alone with him. Tobarama was not his father. He had his own methods, and he would be as gentle as possible and as harsh as necessary. Not for the first time, Tobarama wondered if his death had not mellowed him out. He did not remember being so considerate before. But then again, he had always been especially protective of his family, and the circumstances had been different during his lifetime. He shook his head. There was no time for reminiscence. Tobarama looked from the evenly breathing child to the clone practicing the water shield. Sway-tun, Sway-jun. The shield was still rather small, but grew slightly in size every time he tried. But it was not yet strong enough to withstand the water whip the second clone was using against it. Reduce the attack force. Try to match the strength of the current shield, while simultaneously improving your shield's strength. This way, you will gain a more profound understanding of power levels and improve your mastery over this jutsu. Yes, sensei, the clones answered in unison. Tobarama had not told him to do it, but the child had returned to calling him teacher whenever he was training him. He supposed it was Naruto's way of differentiating between the strict teacher and his parental figure. Tobarama approved of his method. He understood where the child was coming from. It had not been easy for him to call his father intimately while he had put him through a gruesome training. He had tried calling him Shusho once, but his father had strongly disapproved. According to him, he had only fulfilled his fatherly duties. He turned his attention back to the mediating original. Naruto's breath was even and his chakra still a steady flow. He was pleased. The child had come a long way. It was early afternoon when Naruto collapsed on the chair behind the clan head's desk, worn and exhausted from his trying training. He did not have to wait long before he was joined by his older friends. Shursui appeared first, looking almost as exhausted as Naruto felt. He carelessly threw his bag down and flopped on the couch. A deep sigh escaped his lips as he leaned his head back and closed his eyes. Naruto threw him a concerned look. Everything okay? Shursui blinked tiredly at him and hummed slightly. Let's wait for Itachi. Then I don't have to explain twice, okay? Naruto opened his drawer and threw a bag of cookies at Shursui, who snatched it deftly out of the air. Thanks. Naruto watched in amusement as Shursui ripped the package open and proceeded to munch himself happily through his treat. He had already finished half of the bag when Itachi arrived. The Uchiha heir seemed uncharacteristically annoyed, and his lips were set in a hard line. Naruto immediately shoved a box of freshly bought dango into his hands before he opened his takeaway ramen. There was a moment of silence as everyone indulged in their favorite food. Then Shursui sighed and put his bag down. Naruto, Itachi and Tobarama instantly focused on him. The clan is getting very pushy. Shursui informed them grimly. They demand that I keep a closer eye on you, Itachi. Your lack of attendance during their meetings annoys them, to put it mildly. They have given me a deadline. I have 3 months to get substantial proof that you are still loyal to our clan, and not, I quote, in the Hokage's pocket. If I fail, they will set someone else on you, and I fear. The atmosphere darkened, and the silence hung heavily between them. Naruto threw a worried look at Itachi. Substantial proof? He repeated. Shursui nodded. Itachi was quiet. Naruto wondered what he was thinking. Was he worried? Nervous? His face gave nothing away. When he wanted, Itachi could be almost as expressionless as Tobirama. It appears, Itachi finally said in a quiet voice, that today is a day of dire news. I have been approached by Danzo. Naruto put his empty ramen box down and leaned forward. Next to him, his Jiji's presence solidified. Naruto could practically feel the sharp attention emitting from the ghost. Naruto did not have to look at him to know that the man was piercing Itachi with his intelligent, dissecting gaze. What happened? Shursui demanded. Itachi first caught Shursui's, then Naruto's gaze. He was not very talkative, but he said that I would receive a chance to prove my loyalty towards Konoha very soon. Shursui stiffened. I do not like this development. Tobarama's voice sounded inside his mind. Uchiha Itachi is the heir of the clan, planning a coup d'état. It would take something very radical to prove that he is not a traitor. Naruto frowned. Radical? Like what? Tobarama was quiet for a moment before answering. Like eradicating the source of treason. He sounded grave. Naruto froze. His face went white in horror. Eradicating the source of treason? This is just a possibility, right? It does not mean that Itachi has to. Tobarama did not answer. Gigi? Naruto's mental voice sounded panicked. When Tobarama finally replied, his tone was placid and analytical. Your friend Shursui told us that the Uchiha clan would be exterminated if the coup could not be stopped. Both of your friends are part of the Uchiha clan. One of them is the heir. The other one, his best friend. If the Uchiha clan dies, your friends will die too. The only way for them to avoid this fate is to prove their loyalty towards Konoha. Like I said before, one way, the only way, considering the time restraints we are operating under, to prove themselves, is to eradicate the threat themselves. If we look at these facts, possibility becomes high probability. Naruto swallowed. His gaze fell on Itachi. This is cruel, he suddenly blurted out, furious on his friend's behalf. They are your family. They can't demand that you kill your family. It's wrong. Shirsui's head whipped in his direction, and Itachi raised an eyebrow. He did not appear too surprised. How did you come to this conclusion? You are the clan heir. Naruto summarized Tobarama's reasoning. Itachi exchanged a darkly amused look with Shirsui. Shirsui shook his head. Naruto thought his expression looked like a strange mixture between sadness, anger, and it's Naruto. I should have expected that look he sometimes had when Naruto did something out of the norm. It was Shirsui's equivalent to Itachi's flat I don't bother even more expression he adapted on such occasions. Konoha is a military dictatorship, Itachi reminded him. There was something hard in his gaze. It was the same steely look Naruto had seen on Itachi's face when they had found Orochimaru's laboratory. In the end, all of us are soldiers who have to obey, Shirsui snorted. It sounded derisive. We cannot afford to lose more time, Tobarama commented, effectively stopping Naruto's rant before it even began. Has the prisoner talked yet? Naruto swallowed his former words and relayed the question. Shirsui's face darkened even further. About that. He rummaged through his pockets and pulled out a piece of paper. The agent has this seal on her tongue. We believe it prevents her from talking. She freezes up every time Danzo or Root is mentioned. Naruto accepted the paper. Tobarama stepped next to him to examine the seal. How accurate is this? Naruto asked. Shirsui grimaced. Very accurate. Itachi drew it while I held the tongue. Naruto snickered at his displeased face and tried to picture the scene. Even in his head, it looked hilarious. Next to him, Tobarama shifted, and the man's lips set into a thin line. Naruto, what do you see? Naruto looked at the paper. This part here reminds me of a secrecy seal and this. He frowned. Stasis? Almost, Tobarama replied, it is restriction. So, it restricts you if you want to talk? Naruto inquired. Yes, Tobarama confirmed. Seals that cause reactions like the ones your friend just described are usually tied to the seal maker's chakra signature. Typically, they lay dormant and only activate when certain conditions are met. For example, if a certain word is mentioned or a specific action is performed. These seals are especially dangerous since they are intent-based. The seal maker's will is stored inside his chakra the moment the seal gets activated. As long as the seal maker lives, the seal will react to his will. But once he dies, the will evaporates, and the seal dissolves. Then how can this kind of seal be broken? Naruto was curious. They had not covered intent-based seals before. Tobarama smiled grimly. Through the seal maker's death. However, since this seal was most likely made by Danzo, this option is hardly feasible at this point. Naruto paused. They had not yet spoken about what would happen to Danzo once they had him pinned down, but judging by the way his Gigi had just talked, the man was ready to kill him. Danzo had been his Gigi's student. It could not be easy for him to make this kind of decision. Naruto peeked at the man's stoic face. His expression was as even as always, but Naruto could see the cool glint in his red eyes. There was not even a trace of the detached disappointment his Gigi usually showed whenever they talked about the third Hokage. Only icy coldness. Naruto shifted slightly until he was leaning against the man's side and looked back at the drawing. Is there no other way to break it? What do you think? Shirsui's voice suddenly interrupted their conversation. Naruto blinked and raised his head to look at his two expectant friends. Well, this is an intent-based seal, he began. It's a combination of a secrecy and restriction seal. It activates when a certain word, I guess it's something related to Danzo, is mentioned. When it's activated for the first time, the seal maker's will is stored inside it, and the seal acts on it as long as the seal maker is alive. It only disappears with the seal maker's death. His friends stared at him. You read all of this out of these few scribbles? Shirsui asked incredulously. Actually, I just read the secrecy and restriction parts out of it, Naruto replied. He was not even lying. The rest is just a conclusion drawn from your description. Shirsui snorted. Just a conclusion, he says. If it only breaks upon the seal maker's death, Itachi cut in before Shirsui got on a roll, we will not be able to interrogate the prisoner. There might be a way to temporarily block the seal by placing a chakra suppression on it. Tobarama supplied. But it is a very crude and, under normal circumstances, an inadvisable solution because the backlash on the sealed person will be severe. Naruto hesitated for a second before repeating his words. Shursui exchanged a brief look with Itachi, and two pairs of eyes settled on Naruto. The steel in their gazes told him all he needed to know. Shursui ushered Naruto out of the cell the moment he had placed the seal. Naruto did not protest. He left Tobarama with his friends and returned to the office. For the next hour, Naruto busied himself with exploring the main house. He had just finished looking through the empty kitchen cupboards when his friends returned. Their faces were grim. A hand settled on his head and he looked up to meet Tobarama's serious eyes. Naruto understood. He nodded once. They would move tonight. The night air was still cool, and the clouds covered the brightness of the moon, leaving only a faint, glowing light. Shursui was hiding between a pair of thick branches and peered towards the daimyo's residence. He could see several guards moving about, and he was sure that he had just seen someone pass by that reminded him of the third Hokage. He could hear clattering sounds from the right. A carriage was leaving the daimyo's residence. The tall figure on the coach box raised his head as the carriage passed his tree and lifted his hand to tap 3 times against his right shoulder. Shursui responded by raising his hand, and the carriage drove on. He flickered down, making sure to keep to the shadows and out of the blinding lights of the lanterns, and jumped onto the carriage. The coachman turned his head towards him, and Shursui grinned. "I take it you were successful." Uchiha Itachi dissolved his transformation and smirked back. Naturally. The carriage shook slightly as a third person jumped on it, and a new voice added to the conversation. "As if you ever doubted him." Shursui shifted slightly to allow the small figure to sit down between them. "Don't stroke his ego. It's already way too big." The small figure threw his hood back and Uzumaki Naruto grinned at Shursui. "Just like yours," he agreed. Shursui scoffed in mock indignation and looked back towards the residence. Tiny lights flickered behind the darkened windows, and a shadow moved inside the daimyo's office. "I guess," Shursui whispered as the cool night wind brushed through his hair, "this is the beginning." The carriage clattered on, carrying 3 children towards the road of peace. Chapter 24, Trinity 3. The will of fire is jeopardized. The land of fire compromised. Heed the oath your kin gave mine. I am calling for the sun to shine. Saged hands trembled as the man read the lines and stared at the sigil he had only seen in the old history books. He still remembered the story his grandfather had told him while he was but a child. They came to us with strong eyes and fire in their hearts. They spoke of peace and bloodless dreams, and their leader was carrying the power of nature itself with him. Many pacts were made this day, but none was stronger than the oath I gave to the nature's bearer when he saved me from the brink of death. My father tried to stop me, but it did not prevent me from speaking the words. You have saved my life today. I swear by my blood that your grace will be repaid. If not from me to you, then from my kin to yours. May the sun bear witness to this oath. He never called upon his favor, but the oath still stands till this day. The Senju clan had never called for them, and with them slowly fading away, he had all but forgotten about this old story. He had been secure in the knowledge that the only remaining Senju would never call on him. Senju Tsunade was only interested in drinking, gambling, and squandering her life. But apparently, there was someone else out there, another Senju. A clan head, and he knew. He sighed, placed the short note on his desk, and opened the letter. And now we have delivered the letter to the daimyo. Naruto finished his report and nodded emphatically towards the tree. I don't really know why your brother insisted on writing this strange poem, though, he added as an afterthought. I mean, he could have just written, you promised to help us out, so do it. But he says it has something to do with, Saitochi, psychological warfare. He nodded again, proud about getting the words right. The leaves rustled, and a single oak leaf floated down and rested gently on Naruto's head. It felt surprisingly warm and reminded him of a warm palm's tender touch. It was strange. Even throughout the cold winter months, the tree had remained evergreen. According to Tobarama, it was connected to Hashirama's strong chakra residue. Naruto smiled and carefully plucked the leaf from his head. The leaves rustled again and something else fell down. Curiously, Naruto bent down to pick it up. It was an acorn. He grinned. Thank you. Are you talking to my brother again? Naruto turned towards the voice and grinned. Of course. I need to keep him up to date. You know. Of course you do, Tobarama agreed. He sounded fond. Naruto cradled his newest treasure against his chest and looked at the man he considered his closest relation. Something was bothering the child. Tobarama could read it in Naruto's conflicted expression. He stepped next to him and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "What troubles you, child?" he inquired gently. Naruto hesitated. "I just had a study session with Itachi," he answered after a moment of silence. He explained something about Konoha's inheritance laws. He said that you need to prove your blood relation to be recognized as a clan head. "But I don't have your blood." Naruto looked down. He seemed sad. That was what he had been worrying about. Tobarama moved his hand towards the child's chin and gently tilted the downed head up. "The legitimacy of a claim can be proven through more than just blood, Naruto. You are not obligated to have your blood tested. Clan unique abilities can be used to verify claims. In your case, however, it is even simpler. Or have you already forgotten what I have told you about the compound seal? You said it can only be opened by Senju," the child answered quietly. "Yes," Tobarama agreed, "this is what I have told you, and this is what everyone considers to be true." He paused a moment to regard the boy in front of him. His insecure expression made him look even younger than he already was. "I believe it is time to let you in on one of our clan's most guarded secrets. Our clan." Naruto loved the way it sounded. "What I am now going to tell you will stay between us," Tobarama told him sternly. "You will not speak with anyone about it aside from your chosen heir. I'll keep quiet," he promised quickly. And he was serious about it. "I trust you will," Tobarama replied simply and withdrew his hand. Naruto felt cold at the sudden loss of the steadying touch and settled against the tree to make up for it. "Now the Senju seal," Tobarama continued, "the seal that determines whether you are Senju or not." He made a short pause and fixed Naruto with a serious look. "Is a lie or more a half-truth?" Naruto's eyes widened. "A half-truth?" Tobarama nodded. "Yes, Naruto. The so-called Senju seal does not exist. It is part of the extensive protection barrier surrounding the compound that activates once the gates are closed. A seal is incapable of determining your clan affiliation, but it can determine chakra patterns. Once Senju reached the age of 5, they were allowed to leave the compound. Their signature would be added to the detection array, and they were able to open the gates." Naruto stared at him, not really comprehending the reason behind this. "But why? Why would you do that?" "To weed out spies," Tobarama answered seriously. Being able to open the gates was a secure way to determine whether someone was being impersonated by an outsider or not. "Remember, Naruto, my brother and I lived during a war-torn era, and we had to take measures to protect our own." Tobarama's gaze wandered towards the village. "We did not publicize the workings of our barrier to anyone. So over time people simply started to assume that the gates only recognized Senju, which was true in sense, since only Senju were ever written in. This belief was probably further strengthened when nobody was able to enter after our clan had faded away." There was a moment of silence as Naruto mulled over his words. "And I can use this to prove I am a Senju? The seal does not lie," Tobarama replied dryly, "at least not according to a common consensus. That's kind of dumb," Naruto commented lamely. Honestly, they trusted something because they all decided it was true. Even he knew that this was a bad idea. His Jiji had told him often enough that he needed to verify his facts. "I mean, you added Itachi, Shursui and me to it, and they are Uchiha." Tobarama snorted. "Yes, it is," he agreed, "but it is also very convenient for us. When the time comes, this belief will prove your claim. It was true. Being able to open the compound would be proof enough. But just in case, Tobarama was preparing contingency plans. He liked being at least 5 steps ahead of his enemy. The child suddenly interrupted his musings. Tobarama looked at him. "Yes?" He blinked as Naruto extended a small acorn to him. "Can we add this to the necklace?" His face softened, and he placed his hand on the child's head. "Of course. I will show you how." Naruto barely allowed himself to breathe. He was cold and wet. Rain blurred his vision, and he could barely see. He strained his ears. Was someone approaching? Or was he alone? The thunderous rain confused his senses. He centered himself and tried to listen for abnormalities. He searched for the loud, hungry slurps of footsteps on muddy ground. He searched for the wet gliding of drenched cloths scraping against wood, and for the short, silent clink of a sword drawn, rustling from the left. Naruto's eyes snapped open. He jumped and ran. The world blurred around him. Rain pounded down on him. Hard and punishing. He vaulted over the branch in front of him. His fingers brushed the rough, slippery bark. Thump! His pursuer's white mask appeared behind him. Naruto pressed forward. He could already see the clearing in front of him. Just 5 more steps. 4. His pursuer was closing in. 3. He could hear him breathing right behind him. 2. An arm stretched towards him. 1. Naruto jumped over the finish line. Parrot appeared behind him only a breath later. He had won. Naruto was very proud of himself. It was very rare that he got the upper hand during their trainings, even though it had been a very close one. But he had won. He had successfully escaped. Naruto grinned as Owl threw his arm around his shoulders. I knew you could do it. It was very touching that Shui always seemed to believe in him. He was really fortunate to have such a supportive friend. Humph, Parrot huffed in exaggerated irritation and crossed his arms. I want a rematch, he demanded. Badger stood from the log he had been sitting on and gave Parrot's back several comforting pats. There. Somehow, Parrot managed to look extremely unimpressed despite wearing his ANBU mask. Lion ignored his team's antics with practiced ease and tousled Naruto's hair. Good job, Naruto beamed. Tobarama stared at his brother's unmoving frame. It pained him to leave him on this cold table. He wanted nothing more but to pick him up and take him far away. But it was not yet time. He brushed over the pale cheek. Hold on a bit longer, brother. I will get you out of here soon, and then everyone who has hurt you will pay. Tobarama took a deep, calming breath and threw a last regretful look at his brother's unmoving figure. Then he turned away. He felt dreadful. I am not abandoning him, he repeated mentally. He knew it was true. But it did not stop him from feeling guilty. He felt like he was leaving Hashirama to the mercy of their enemy. It did not sit well with him. Furious beyond belief, Tobarama left the laboratory and floated down the corridor, towards Danzo's office. Danzo was present this time. Tobarama saw him sitting at his desk, flipping through a report. A cup of steaming tea was standing next to him. It smelled like kabocha. Feeling very spiteful, Tobarama knocked it over, and the hot beverage spilled over Danzo's trousers. The man let out a loud yelp and jumped up, quickly slipping out of his soaked clothes. Tobarama smirked and used the man's momentary distraction to skim over the paper on the desk. It was an observation report. His eyes narrowed as he recognized the target's names. Uchiha Itachi, Uchiha Shui, Uzumaki Naruto. The report was short. Mark 1, Mark 2, and Mark 3 have been seen entering the Hokage Tower together. Attempts at investigation were intercepted by ANBU Captain Hound, and we were forced to retreat. Mark 1, 2, and 3 continue to show close bonds. They have frequently been spotted having dinner together. Mark 1 and 2 continue to evade their trails. As per instruction, Mark 3 is currently not being pursued. Danzo was keeping an eye on the children. It was not unexpected, but nonetheless very irritating. He supposed that Mark 1 and Mark 2 were Itachi and Shui. He would have noticed if someone had tried to trail his child. Tobarama would have to urge Naruto to exert even more caution. Still, the part about root agents trying to get into the Hokage Tower was perturbing. The implications were grave. Their forces had been further compromised than he had thought. Once Danzo was gone, they would have to clean house. Konoha had no place for traitors. Danzo was about to sit down again. Tobarama absently tugged the chair away. The man collided harshly with the floor and swore in a very vulgar way. Tobarama raised an eyebrow at the creative swearwords leaving the man's mouth. He looked rather pathetic in his white underwear. Danzo stood up again. This time he kept a tight hold on the chair as he sat down and started to clean off the spilled tea. Tobarama waited until he was almost done, then he subtly nudged the ink pot closer to the man's elbow. Splash! The entire desk was covered in a thick, black substance. Danzo screamed. Tobarama smirked. Sometimes being a ghost was rather useful. What the hell is going on today? The man snarled as he picked his soaked reports out of the ink puddle. They had become unreadable. Good. That would delay whatever plans Danzo had at least a few days. Danzo threw the drenched papers into his dustbin and glared at the mess on his desk. The frustrated anger on Danzo's face was amusing, but not really satisfying. Tobarama's childish tricks only served as a momentary distraction from his It did, however, not stop him from activating the man's summoning seal and leaving the door ajar. As he left, the overdutiful root agents coming to report and got to see an entirely new side of their leader that day. Beyond the veil, Senju Hashirama snorted in amused exasperation at his brother's antics and sighed. Beloved, what did you teach my brother? Chapter 25, Trinity 4. Naruto slurped the rest of his noodles and chewed thoughtfully. You want us to test our connection? He asked after he had swallowed his precious ramen down. Indeed, Tobarama agreed, it is way past time that we tried out the limits. We already know we can speak like this, Naruto replied mentally. And I think I've felt some of your emotions before. Tobarama furrowed his brows. Can you feel them now? Naruto tilted his head and an expression of deep concentration settled over his face. Then he squinted his eyes shut and slowly shook his head. No. Can you feel mine? No, Tobarama replied. You are sure you have felt mine before? Yes. Naruto was absolutely sure. He nodded for emphasis. Then we might be missing a trigger, Tobarama mused. Perhaps it only works if certain conditions are met. For example, if our emotions are especially strong emotions? Naruto wondered and absently played with his chopsticks. Strong emotions. Was there something he felt strongly about? Well, he liked ramen. Naruto glanced at the empty bowl. But somehow, he doubted that this would count. What else did he like? Orange. But that was probably the same as ramen. He glanced at the ghost. He liked him, too. Very much even. But was like even the right word? It did not feel big enough for that. It was not enough to describe what he felt when the man praised him, when he taught him, when he protected him. It was not enough to describe the joy he felt when he saw Tobarama smile. It was not enough to describe the warmth of the man's hug and the safety he felt in his presence. It was more. But what? Tobarama started and slowly raised his head to look at him. Naruto. He began quietly. What are you doing? I am thinking of you, Naruto replied, hopped down his chair and scampered around the table to look at Tobarama. Do you feel that? Tobarama stared at the child in front of him. He had grown to care for him quite deeply, and he knew that Naruto liked him, too, but this was something entirely else. The emotion he felt from him was not care. It was not fondness. It was love. Naruto loved him. This child loved him. Tobarama had never been a man of emotions, but somehow, at this moment, he did not care. Stunned at the sheer strength of the child's emotion, he brushed his hand over the boy's cheek and allowed himself to do something he had only ever done in his brother's presence. He let his guard down and allowed himself to feel. Yes, little one. I feel that. A bright smile illuminated Naruto's face, and he clambered on his lap. Good, the child decided and buried his head in his chest, because I can feel yours, too. Small arms wrapped around his waist, and Tobarama automatically placed a hand on the tiny back. Najiji? Naruto suddenly asked. He sounded tentative. May I call you grandfather? Tobarama stilled. Grandfather? The child wanted to call him grandfather. It's all right if you don't want to, the child said quickly, when he took a bit too long to answer. Tobarama could feel overwhelming embarrassment and regret seeping through their bond. I am just, if you wish, he interrupted before the child could lose himself in another bout of self-doubt. Naruto stiffened. Really? He sounded desperately hopeful. Tobarama put his hand on the child's head and tightened his grip. Yes. It would be prudent, too, since I have already named you my heir. The child's joy crushed over him like one of his more volatile jutsus. Tobarama made a mental note to look into ways to control the strength of the transmission. Otherwise, Naruto's emotions would constantly throw him off. Naruto burrowed his face in his fur. The child seemed to like the soft material. Maybe he should get him a fur coat, too, that reminded him. The child's clothes were becoming a bit too worn. He needed something better to protect him. Perhaps, he sized the child up. Yes, perhaps he was big enough. He placed his arms around the boy and stood. Naruto threw him a curious glance, but seemed content with just remaining in his arms. Tobarama left the office and walked down the chilly floor until he reached the door that led to his former room. He took a deep breath and opened it. It was still the way he remembered it. The bedsheets had the same forest green color he remembered, and even the curtains were pulled up exactly the way he had left it. Not a single speck of dust covered the heavy mahogany drawer, and the floor was as clean as ever. He placed Naruto on top of his bed. The child eyed his new surroundings with great interest. Where are we? He asked curiously. My rooms, Tobarama replied, and absently noticed how his answer made the child's outstretched hand pause before it reached for the bed curtains, slower and more tentative than before. Tobarama opened his wardrobe and found the chest he was looking for at the very back. He waved the child over. Naruto, come here. Naruto hopped down the bed and hurried over. Naruto was curious. Why had his grandfather? And yes, he had a grandfather. He was still over the moon because of that. Why had he brought him to his rooms? What was in that mysterious chest? Treasure? A sleeping dragon? Or a map leading to a great treasure? He was wrong on all three accounts. But Naruto was not disappointed because the chest contained something even better. He carefully pulled the leather out. Is that? Tobarama's hand landed on his shoulder. Our clan has a tradition. If a child of the main family is first allowed to leave the compound, the clan head will gift them an armor. I would have liked to have a new one crafted for you, but alas, it is not possible. I can, however, gift you my first armor. It is still in a good condition. Try it on. Naruto had not to be told twice. The armor consisted entirely of leather plates and was lighter than it appeared to be. Naruto scrutinized himself in the mirror and realized that the style was somewhat similar to the one Tobarama wore. In fact, the only difference seemed to be that his armor came with a kusazuri. While his grandfather seemed to have foregone his. He looked at the man who was watching him with an almost nostalgic expression. The scene was so similar. He had seen it twice before. First with Kawurama, then with Itama. He distinctly remembered the littlest one asking him how he looked. So, when Naruto phrased the same question, Tobarama gave the same answer he had once before. Menacing. And just like Itama, Naruto giggled. But unlike him, Naruto would live. Where are you going? Are you questioning me, mortal? Yes, I am. Hashirama stepped forward and stopped in front of the dark presence. His face was fearless, and his eyes shone with the sharpness of polished steel. You might be the warden of these plains, but even you must obey the laws. The dark presence flickered angrily. Their connection is deepening. It is unnatural. The lawbreakers must be purged. Hashirama's eyes flashed. His chakra crackled, illuminating the air and settling around him like a dragon ready to strike. You are overstepping your authority, Shinigami. You have no right to interfere with the living. He is dead, the presence snarled. He is mine, he escaped you. He is yours no longer, Hashirama reminded him, not the slightest bit fazed by the angry tendrils of liquid shadow sprouting from the otherworldly presence. And the child is still alive. He was never yours, the Shinigami screamed. How dare you talk to me like this, mortal? Know your place. The one who should remember his place, Hashirama replied, and his chakra settled over the area like a heavy, smothering blanket, is you. Mortal, you will not touch my family. Hashirama's voice carried ice. Do not forget, Shinigami, that you can be purged, too, should you overstep your bounds. What counts as balance is not determined by you, and as long as I stand here, you shall not pass. His chakra crackled. I will destroy you. The being roared. And break Ashura's circle? Hashirama was not impressed. Who is the lawbreaker now? Hashirama ignored the earth-shaking, thundering rage of the eternal being. He had accomplished his goal. The Shinigami would not leave these plains today. His face softened as he watched his brother gift the child his first male. Take good care of each other, little brother, dear nephew. The clock struck exactly 3 o'clock when Naruto, Itachi and Shisui gathered in front of a sushi restaurant at the eastern end of Konoha that was mainly frequented by shinobi. Their meeting place had been Shisui's idea because he had apparently woken with a sudden craving for sushi, since neither Naruto nor Itachi wanted to deal with a grumpy Shisui. They had readily acquiesced. The two Uchiha had just returned from duty and were still wearing their umbi uniforms, even though their masks had been carefully hidden away. Shisui raised an eyebrow as he saw Naruto's new appearance. Nice male. Seems somewhat familiar. Naruto snorted at the blatant hint. I found it in a chest. It fit. Well, it certainly suits you, Itachi commented, and it provides better protection than the clothes you have worn before. Although, he threw a serious look at Naruto, it might draw some unwanted attention. Or the right, Naruto replied cheerfully. Itachi's lips twitched. Indeed. Good, now that we've all commented on Naruto's new hobby to look terrifying by running around impressively armored, can we please go in? I am hungry. Itachi threw him an unimpressed look. You are always hungry. Exactly, Shisui replied, threw his arms around his friends and marched them through the door. The restaurant's patrons were treated to a strange sight that day. Yumino Irika, who had been eating with his fellow academy teachers, looked up as the door opened and stared at the strange scene. Jounin Uchiha Shisui was standing in the doorway. He had thrown his left arm around the shoulders of a young teenager, Irika recognized as Chunin Uchiha Itachi. The other arm was around a boy not older than 6. He was wearing a battle armor and looked strangely familiar. Hey Mario-san, is that not your former student? One of his colleagues asked. Sumio Mario looked up, and a dark expression flitted over his face. Yeah. That's him. The Uzumaki Kid.So, this was the Nine-Tails jailer. He looked oddly normal, aside from his old-fashioned armor, of course. Is it true he graduated in less than a year? Irika asked. Mario took a deep gulp of his sake and made a sound of disgruntled agreement. No idea how he managed it, though. That brat was terrible until he suddenly wasn't anymore. I still think he cheated. He doesn't deserve this headband. Irika narrowed his eyes at him. That comment had been completely uncalled for, no matter if he liked the kid or not. Sumio must have spoken a bit too loudly because the Uzumaki kid suddenly froze and the two Uchiha turned their heads into their direction. Their gazes were so cold they could have frozen ice. Jounin Uchiha Shursui seemed like he wanted to storm over, but the Uzumaki kid placed a hand on his arm and said something in a low voice. Whatever it was, it seemed to calm him down. Uchiha Itachi, however, was still fixing his colleague with steely eyes, as if trying to decide whether he should decapitate him or not, and Irika suddenly remembered that this teenager was an Umbu captain. An Umbu captain who seemed to be a very close friend of the child Sumio had just bad-mouthed. Let's go eat somewhere else, Uchiha Shursui proclaimed loudly. There is rubbish lying around. It makes me sick. I could clean it up, Uchiha Itachi offered with a pleasant smile. It won't take much time. Thanks, Itachi, Uzumaki answered cheerfully. But the last time you cleaned up, someone had to clean up after you. Yeah, Uchiha Shursui agreed, you always leave a bloody mess behind. They left. What a scary trio. Yoshimi Sozui patted Sumio's shoulder. Seems like you just made enemies with the Uchiha prodigies. Tough luck, mate. Shizen, give me the sake bottle, Tsunade-sama. You already had 2 bottles. Who cares? 3 bottles a day keeps the medic away, Tsunade snorted. Fine. Be that way. I'll get it myself. She stood up and walked towards the shelf. An apple a day, Tsunen-sama. Apple. Shizen corrected quickly and jumped forward to snatch the bottle before Tsunade could reach it. And you are a medic yourself. How are you supposed to keep away from yourself? I'll manage, Tsunade answered drily and attempted to snatch the sake out of Shizen's hand. Shizen jumped away. Please reconsider, Tsunade-sama. Drinking is not good for health. You of all people should know that. Tsunade remained undeterred. The bottle, Shizen. Now. No yes. No yes. I refuse to sound like a 3-year-old, Tsunade-sama. Shizen, you. Tsunade's answer was cut short as a tiny slug suddenly appeared on the windowsill and squeaked her name. Tsunade-sama. I have important news. Tsunade immediately abandoned her sake acquisition quest in favor of greeting the newest arrival. 5 minutes later, Tun-Tun quickly took shelter under the table as his mistress let out an enraged yell. What do you mean I have family? Shizen watched as her master walked circles of engagement into the already worn floor. A kid, Shizen, a kid. There's a Senju kid out there. A kid who carries the sigil, and nobody told me a bloody thing. Tsunade stopped abruptly and reached for the sake bottle. Shizen batted her hand away. So this kid, who is he? Tsunade glared at her. Naruto, or something like that. Honestly, who names their kid after food? Someone who likes to eat. Shizen offered and snatched the bottle. Must be. Anyway, Tsunade slumped on the bed. What am I supposed to do, Shizen, right now? Go to bed. It is late. Tomorrow? We can talk about it, Tsunade snorted. Fine. I am dead tired anyway. Give me the cup. I want a nightcap. No, Shizen replied briskly. Good night, Tsunade-sama. Tsunade had a strange dream. A gigantic bottle was talking to her. Somehow, the bottleneck bore an eerie similarity to her grandfather, and was quite insisting that she should go and support a fish cake. Was he trying to run for the position of seafood daimyo or what? Well, if Grandpa really wanted it that badly, she could paint a nice election banner. Tsunade woke 6 hours later with a headache and a sudden craving for fish. Shizen, get me Naruto. Shizen blinked. The Senju kid? No, the fish cake. And what about the kid? Tsunade groaned. The same night, the innkeeper saw a blonde blur stomping out of the guest room. The legendary sucker only paused to tell him, send the bill to the Senju compound before slamming the door behind her. The invoice would reach a confused Naruto before the dead arrived. Chapter 26, Trinity 5. When the two Uchiha entered Naruto's office, they found the boy sitting at his desk, staring dumbfounded at a sheet of paper. Did something happen? Shursui inquired, flopping down on the couch. You look puzzled. I'm not sure. Naruto held up the sheet of paper. I got a bill here. 4. His gaze slid to the breakdown. 12 bottles of sake, 2 single rooms for 5 nights plus pet surcharge for a pig and 3 broken tables. It's issued to Senju Tsunade. Shursui made a choking sound. Senju Tsunade? Naruto nodded. And here is another one. 15 sake bottles, 2 broken chairs and the fee for getting rid of pig extreme excrements, his grandfather supplied. His tone sounded strange, and his face was exceedingly blank. Pig excrements, Naruto finished. What's that, grandfather? He added mentally, and threw a confused look at the hysterically laughing Shursui and the amused-looking Itachi, whose eyes shone bright in merriment. What you leave behind when you visit the lavatory, his grandfather replied blandly. Naruto wrinkled his nose. That did not sound particularly pleasant. So, who is this Senju Tsunade? He asked the room at large. She is my grandniece, grandfather informed him in a dry voice. She is a spoiled child with quite the temper. My brother, in his infinite wisdom, always used to indulge her, and even took her gambling and drinking. A wry smile appeared on his face. It seems, he gestured towards the invoice, her habit of accumulating bills has not changed at all. But I am glad to see she is still alive, even if she seems to be gallivanting around. Senju Tsunade, Itachi answered over the still snickering Shursui, is Konoha's best medic and one of the 3rd students who are known as the Sannin. But she has left this village a long time ago, and has not been seen ever since. He threw a pointed look at Naruto. She is the Shodai's granddaughter. Naruto tilted his head. Itachi threw him an amused look and continued, she is also known for drinking and gambling excessively. Because she always keeps losing, they call her the legendary sucker. Shursui laughed even louder. She sent you her bills. This is priceless, Tobarama face-bombed. Abandoning the village, drinking, gambling. These were not deeds to be proud of. He really wanted to march off and drag that unruly child back by her ears. Why did his brother's line have to be so disorderly? Her father had been just the same. I want to meet her someday, Naruto told him. Tobarama's mental alarm bells rung. He had to make sure Tsunade did not end up influencing his child. At least his line needed to maintain common sense. The child looked back at the invoices. But what should I do with this? Do we even have enough to pay for this? Tobarama refocused on the topic at hand and studied the bills over Naruto's shoulder. We can cover that, although we do have to find a way of raising money soon. Perhaps we can open a seal store. But this is a topic for later. Now for these bills. Tobarama had dealt with grandniece's stunts more than once and knew exactly how to handle this. Deduct the amount from her allowance. Naruto nearly dropped the bills. Her allowance? Tobarama smirked. You are the clan head now, child, and she is a member of the main family. That means she receives a regular stipend from you. It is well within your rights to reduce or suspend it, however. Naruto blinked. That's weird. She's an adult. His grandfather chuckled. You will have to get used to it.So Shursui, who had finally managed to calm down, suddenly interjected. What are you going to do about those bills? I hope you do not intend to pay them, Itachi commented. It would set a bad precedent. It's alright. Naruto shrugged. I'll deduct it from her allowance. It sounded strange to actually say it. Shursui roared with laughter, while the younger Uchiha nodded in satisfaction. Good. A clan head needs to take a clear stance. Itachi walked around the desk. Perhaps you should write her a letter. A letter? Naruto looked curiously at him. But I don't even know where she is. I can help you there. Itachi smiled, looking quite pleased. And this is even related to some news I would like to share with you. I recently signed a summoning contract. Naruto's eyes widened. Really? He looked at Itachi, excitement written over his face. Which one? I am now the holder of the crow contract. A crow contract. That sounded cool. Naruto grinned at Itachi. Great news! I am happy for you. Itachi ruffled his head. Thank you, Naruto. It's a pity, Shursui commented, still snickering. I really thought it would be an ostrich. It would have been fitting. Itachi tossed a pillow at the older Uchiha. I suppose yours would have to be a jellyfish, then, he shot back. They lack brains, too, Shursui grimaced. Ouch. That hurt. Good, Itachi replied plainly. Now about this letter? Naruto sent a mental inquiry at his contemplative grandfather. The man nodded slowly. The idea has merit. We can discuss this later. I'll do it later. Good idea, thanks, Itachi, the young Uchiha nodded. Of course, Now we should discuss the reason for today's meeting. He handed Naruto a red scroll. This is a mission scroll written by the Jounin commander. We have an appointment with him tonight. They want to see the lab we found. Shursui snorted. Took them long enough. Naruto accepted the scroll and unrolled it. There was a slight shift in the air as his grandfather moved to stand behind him. For a moment, there was silence as they both read the message. Then Naruto tilted his head. Why do we have to appear masked? I believe Hokage-sama intends to keep our identity secret, Itachi replied. Especially yours. He gave Naruto a serious look. We don't know who else will be there tonight, and as much as I want to believe that Hokage-sama has chosen only trustworthy people, we cannot be sure that they have not been compromised. So stay close to us tonight, Shursui added, equally serious. I will. Naruto agreed easily. Good. Shursui rummaged in his pockets and pulled a small bag out. I've bought these bracelets. He undid the knot, carefully placed 3 leather bracelets on the desk, and looked at Naruto. I thought you could figure out a way for us to communicate with each other. Good thinking, Tobarama commented, and bent forward to inspect the metal plates fastened to the bracelets. We do not have time for elaborate seal development, but we should be able to make it warm and pulse. A conditional heating will take care of the former, but... He raised an eyebrow at his young student. What components would you need for the pulsing? Naruto picked up a bracelet and turned it in his hands. Lightning. Something that tempers it, wind, and a stabilizer. And to make it work? His grandfather prompted. Naruto paused. What else did they need? He looked at the plate. They were trying to design a communication system. What else could? Of course, an activator. There was no point to it if they could not use it. Intent. Tobarama nodded. Correct. Now, which basic shanner is used to connect the parts? 3, Naruto replied immediately. Good. Tobarama smirked. Well, now that we have clarified matters, kindly take the green book from the shelf. There you will find the seal that Hashirama and I used to communicate with each other. Page 38. Naruto nearly dropped the bracelet. You had one ready all the time? Of course, Tobarama replied casually. Or do you honestly believe I never thought of something similar? Naruto nearly groaned. That was so typical of his grandfather. First, he quizzed Naruto's brains out, then he presented an even simpler solution. He had complained about it once and got a very matter-of-fact, you need to learn. In return, can you please get me the green book? He asked Itachi, who was closest to the shelf, somewhat faintly. Itachi shot him a slightly curious look and did as he asked. Thanks, Naruto smiled at him and flipped through the pages. What are you looking for? Shursui inquired, as he and Itachi stepped behind him. A seal, Naruto answered absently. It has to be somewhere here. Now where is page 38? He was so busy searching that he completely missed the affectionately exasperated looks his friends were exchanging over his head. Found it! He finally announced triumphantly. It doesn't look too difficult. But it will take some time to cut it in. He tilted his head. It would go faster if I just painted it on for tonight. Are there any disadvantages to this? Itachi inquired. Naruto shook his head. None that would matter much this time. It's just that they're easier to destroy. Painted seals don't last very long and are usually a little weaker. They fade as the ink fades. But it's just for tonight, and I'll use waterproof ink. He felt Tobarama's hand rest on his head in silent praise. His mood brightened. He loved it when his grandfather was proud of him. Fascinating, Itachi replied. I might have to start reading up on this subject, he mused quietly. Shursui groaned. If you read up on everything that interests you, you'll become an old man before you finally put the books down. Itachi seemed undeterred by this objection. I at least wish to understand the basics. It never hurts to broaden your skills. I'll find you something to read, Naruto promised, and threw a bright grin at Itachi. He was thrilled to see his friend's interest in his area of expertise. Itachi nodded gratefully at him. Your friend would certainly benefit from knowing a few seals centered around camouflage, stealth, and detection. Perhaps even a barrier or two, his grandfather commented as he scrutinized the young Uchiha. I'll suggest it later, Naruto sent back. Shursui sighed and stood up. Fine, do what you want. Now let's see if you have everything you'll need for a nighttime S-class mission. Naruto was nervous. This was his first official assignment, and it was about something so important. Naruto, his grandfather put his hands on his shoulders and crouched down to meet his eyes. You must remain clear-headed tonight. Do not lose sight of your objective and stay close to your friends. I will scout ahead and warn you should I encounter any kind of trouble. You may relay any warning I give you. Not being misidentified as a censor is not of high priority tonight. Should you find yourself in danger, use our connection to call for me. Okay. Naruto nodded seriously at him. Good, now request your blessing the way I taught you. Naruto grabbed the acorn dangling from his neck. Ancestors of old, please stay by my side. Join me in honor and lead me through plight. He felt the acorn warm slightly, and his grandfather's palm closed around his hand. Are you ready? I am, Naruto replied firmly and donned his mask. The tension in the room was almost palpable. The third stood in front of two units, behind him a man with a completely white mask. Somewhat beside him, Naruto Shikaku was talking to a man with scars on his face. The operation will commence soon, the Hokage informed those present. Everything that happens tonight is subject to the strictest secrecy. Joint command will be given to the commanders of the ANBU and the Jounin. Your guides will arrive any moment. They were the ones who discovered the laboratory, so I expect you to listen to their warnings and directions. A sharp knock sounded on the door, and the occupant's attention turned towards the three people walking inside. The three newly arrived masks bowed as one. Hokage-sama, Weasel, Owl. The Hokage's gaze fell on the young child between the two umbu, and he paused for a second before adding, Here. Then he addressed the room at large. Shikaku will brief you on anything else. Konoha thanks you for your service. He dissolved. Shikaku turned towards the assembled shinobi, and for a second his gaze lingered on the three children. They seemed even closer than before, and Shikaku absently wondered if something had transpired between them. They had just bowed in such perfect synchrony that he wondered how they had managed to read the exact moment the others would move. Especially, young Naruto was a puzzle wrapped into an enigma, with a nice gift bow on top of it. His white mask looked tiny in the sea of white and crimson, and yet he blended in so seamlessly. It was baffling. Then it occurred to him that this child's mask looked almost like half of the ANBU commander's mask, and for a fraction of a second, he mused about the deeper meaning behind it. Then he laughed at himself. Shikaku did not believe in foreshadowing. What should come to pass would happen. Still, once this was over, he would politely inquire about the child's interest in Shagai. It would be an interesting match. Chapter 27, Trinity 6. Tobarama disliked the way Naruto meshed with the masks. Any normal child would be apprehensive about being surrounded by the village's most ruthless and adult killers, and yet Naruto was completely at ease. Tobarama knew that Team Ku was partly to blame for this. The amount of time Naruto spent with them was immense. It was no wonder he had become desensitized to the ANBU's presence. The other part of the blame, however, laid with him and the people Naruto usually surrounded himself with. The child was constantly in the presence of people much stronger and more experienced than him. This had the unwanted side effect of Naruto developing a warped view on power scales. Both Tobarama and the Uchiha children were exceptionally skilled, and Naruto's ANBU team consisted of individuals who were specialists in their chosen fields. That meant that the child had no idea what kind of skill level was normal because he had only Tobarama, the Uchiha children, and the ANBU to compare himself to. In a way, it was both a blessing and curse. A curse because Naruto was pushing himself harder than any child should, and a blessing because Naruto needed to get stronger as soon as possible. This was why Tobarama never attempted to correct Naruto's conception of strength. Instead, he adapted to it and used it to push the child just a bit farther. It brought him no joy to see the child beaten and bruised, and it displeased him even more to be the cause of it. Nevertheless, he could not deny the pride he felt every time Naruto rose again with fire in his eyes. Still, and this brought him back to the current situation, he disliked seeing his child among the masks. He smiled a bit wryly to himself as he realized that only the presence of the two Uchiha stopped him from worrying too much. We have arrived. It was a strange feeling to be among these people. The ANBU reminded Naruto of his team, and yet they were entirely different. They were quieter, for once, and their postures more rigid. Maybe it was just Team Ku, who was easygoing. Or perhaps it was the presence of their ANBU commander that made them exceptionally vigilant. He certainly had a strong presence, even though he had not spoken much besides introducing himself as blank. It was certainly a fitting name. He had, however, left it to the Jounin commander to explain their mission parameters. Their objectives were short and, at least in theory, simple: get in, secure the evidence, and avoid confrontation. Then he had sent them off while he had stayed back to coordinate their operation via radio. That was when the ANBU commander had taken the lead. Naruto looked at the man when they stopped in front of the shed. This is the correct location. The commander asked sharply. Yes, blank, I'll confirmed as he and Weasel came to a halt next to Naruto. Blank made a curt hand gesture and 3 ANBU stepped forward. Secure the area. Don't let anyone in or out. The 3 masks vanished. Take your formations. We go in.as. Naruto was about to pass the commander. A heavy hand landed on his shoulder, and he looked up to meet Blank's empty mask. Hair. Naruto snapped to attention. Yes, sir, yes, blank, the man corrected sharply. I have reservations about your presence, but I have been assured that you will be an asset to this operation. That said, I will give you the same warning I give to all my men: mess up, and you will be running obstacle course C for 5 weeks straight. Got it? Naruto had no idea what course C was, but judging by the slight hiss he heard from Owl, it was not anything pleasant. Yes, blank, he replied. Good. The hand squeezed his shoulder and gave him a light push. Now, get inside. He's kind of scary, Naruto commented mentally. He's the ANBU commander, Tobarama's voice responded flatly over their bond. Men in his position are rarely recruited because of their amicability and outstanding social skills. Naruto nearly stumbled over his feet. Did you just make a joke? Concentrate, Naruto, Tobarama admonished. Yes, grandfather, Naruto replied obediently, not failing to notice the ghost's lack of denial. It was dark inside. Only a single light cone illuminated the way. In the weak light, his companion's white mask shone almost eerily. The interior of the shed had not changed at all. The air was still heavy with dust, and each step produced a fine cloud. Naruto could see the dust particles dance in the electric torch's light, and his nose tingled. Weasel parted from their formation and walked towards the door leading to the room containing the entryway. Naruto could see the shadowed outline of his friend crouching down to inspect the frame. His voice was quiet as he reported his findings. The piece of plastic is still jammed in. There are no signs of anyone passing through, blank. Naruto did not even know he had trapped the door. Weasel must have done it after Naruto had fallen asleep. His friend was thorough like that. Proceed, blank's order cut through the room. Naruto felt All taking position next to him as Weasel opened the door. His bracelet pulsed 3 times in quick succession. Naruto translated it to, be ready. Weasel opened the door. Naruto felt a rush of nervousness as the light cone hit the mighty, dark wood. ANBU holding the electric torch moved forward to examine it. It's sealed, blank. Like reported. That's what I am here for, Naruto interjected, and Weasel moved aside to let him pass. He walked forward and crouched down next to the iron ring. I will only be able to temporarily disable it, he warned. The array is carved into stone, which means I would have to carve into it, too, to destroy it. But we don't have enough time for that. He pulled a scroll out of his pocket and unsealed it. A bottle of ink and a brush popped out. This is a special kind of ink that can only be removed with an alcoholic solution. Naruto dipped his brush into it. Which means it cannot be accidentally washed away by a water jutsu and blow up on us. Blow up, blank repeated. Naruto was too focused on the carvings that he missed the short signed exchange between blank and Weasel. If removed incorrectly, Naruto replied. Light, please. Shursui switched his electric torch on and moved the light cone towards the carvings. Seals have a balance, Naruto continued as he started writing. Every stroke supports another one. At any point of time, the balance must be maintained. Imbalance is one of the main reasons that accidents happen. No need to worry, though, he added as he saw the ANBU holding the electric light twitch in response to his words. I know what I am doing, Al was amused. It was the first time he saw Hair being, well, himself in front of others. His young friend had the uncanny ability to accidentally render people speechless just by pulling and saying things a kid his age should not be able to say or do. Hearing him lecture a group of ANBU about seals, while casually mentioning the probability of being blown up, was frankly hilarious. It was even more amusing to see said ANBU shifting slightly in apparent nervousness. I am done, Hare announced. Al had already known what to expect next, but he was still fascinated by the glow. Just like the last time, the carving blurred out until it became unreadable and Naruto looked up. It can be opened now, he announced and sealed his utensils away. Blank raised his hand and the 2 ANBU next to him rushed forward to yank it open. Darkness greeted them. Tobarama placed his hand on Naruto's head. This is where we part ways for now, child. Remember to stay close to your friends and call for me should anything happen. He paused to fix Naruto with a stern look. Now I want you to promise me that you will not unnecessarily endanger yourself. He did not trust the child not to pull any unnecessary heroics. While Tobarama had managed to temper Naruto's hot-headedness quite well, the child was still prone to the occasional bout of irrationality when he got overly emotional. He was too much like Hashirama in this regard. I promise, grandfather, the child replied. Tobarama studied him for a moment to make sure he was serious, and then nodded once. Good. His hand lingered for a moment on the child's head before he finally withdrew it. Then he vanished into the tunnel. Wolf had worked with Weasel and Owl before. These two had always operated well together. But the wordless coherence they displayed now was new. Her gaze wandered to Hare, the mysterious kid who had turned up out of nowhere and hung around one of their elite units. A kid carrying a codename while not being part of their organization. He belonged to his unit, but he was not one of them. It was a situation that was unheard of, and Wolf was not the only one interested in this. She knew everyone was paying very close attention to the kid's actions. Seals were dangerous and difficult. Everyone was aware of these facts. The few of them who knew basic seals always required complete silence as they worked because they were terrified of messing up. Yet, the kid had been completely at ease. Hell, he had even managed to lecture them about improper seal removal. Nevertheless, the effortlessness with which he had painted these dangerous symbols had filled her with both fascination and nerve-wracking tension. Who the hell had thought it was a good idea to let a kid close to something so dangerous? Weasel and Owl, apparently. They had been the only ones completely at ease. It was most likely the reason Blank had not interfered. She had seen the exchange between him and Weasel. Weasel had acknowledged Hare's skills, and Blank trusted Weasel's judgment. It had not been a mistake. Whatever the kid had done, had worked. The entry was open. Wolf knew the kid had just scored big with them. As she watched their guides prepare to enter the tunnel, she wondered if the kid was aware of the scrutiny he was under. Owl and Weasel definitely were. She had noticed them subtly moving to cover the kid from overly curious gazes. Then, the commander's order cut through the air and Wolf snapped to attention. From now on, I want absolute silence. All communication will commence nonverbally. His gaze fell on Hare. He was probably trying to come up with a way to cover the kid's lack of nonverbal communication skills. I understand the sign language, Blank, Hare offered, and Wolf nearly blinked in surprise. What? Sign language was usually not taught before the rank of Special Jounin, or Chunin, depending on which field you worked in. He does, Owl agreed and casually stepped next to Hare. Communication will not be a problem, Weasel added, appearing at the kid's other side. They looked passively protective. For a few seconds Blank was quiet, then, you three. Take point. Wolf was sure she had just heard a note of wry amusement in the man's tone. Yes, Blank, they replied in unison and turned as one. The synchrony of this action was almost eerie. Wolf was reminded of the way they had greeted the Hokage and was once again thrown aback by the casual coherence between them. She could not see any visible communication going on between the three as Weasel wordlessly passed an electric torch to Owl and Hare naturally moved between them. Then, Owl vanished inside the tunnel. Chapter 28, Trinity 7. Naruto was fully aware that he was being subtly assessed. It was nothing obvious, but he still felt the silent attention they paid to his actions. It made him slightly nervous, and yet he considered himself lucky in a strange way. After all, no one openly objected to his presence or dismissed him as useless, like regular shinobi might have done upon seeing how young he was. But Konoha's deadly elite did not bother with such trivialities. They had been trained to look beneath. Thus, they watched, they assessed, and then they judged. And speaking of watching, Naruto could not see much from behind Owl's back, but he was sure that they were now close to the parts where they had encountered the first rude agent. The same room with the death trap that had nearly killed his friends. He tensed slightly at the memory, and a shiver ran through his spine as his mind supplied him with an echo of the panic he had felt. As if sensing his unease, Weasel's hand briefly touched his back. It was only a light, fleeting touch, but it reminded Naruto that they were still here. Alive, and he had to make sure it stayed this way. Naruto unconsciously straightened his posture, sternly reminding himself to concentrate. This was important, and he was determined not to mess up. In front of him, Owl raised his hand. Naruto stopped, as did the masks behind him. It was a clear testament to their skills that they came to a collective halt without colliding with each other. As Owl turned around to silently coordinate with Blank, Naruto used the opportunity to contact his grandfather. Jizan, we are now at the key room. We didn't meet anyone, Good, the man's voice vibrated across their bond. I have not encountered any hostiles either. But do not let your guard down just yet. Things that proceed too smoothly are prone to rapidly spiraling out of control. Be more alert than ever, okay? There was a small, childish part of him that thought that Tobarama was overcautious, but Naruto was quick to silence it. He trusted his grandfather, and he had promised to be careful, so he would be careful. Databao, Naruto sent his two friends an all-clear signal through his bracelet, and he could feel them answer in response. Tobarama was apprehensive. He could not even pinpoint what it was that troubled him. It was simply an underlying feeling of unease that he could not quite shake off. A feeling he knew better than to disregard. His instincts rarely led him wrong. After all, if he only knew what they were trying to warn him of. The area was clear. He had not encountered a single enemy. So, why was his neck prickling? What were his senses trying to tell him? He entered the laboratory and understood immediately. The stone gnashed angrily as Weasel turned the key. Naruto peered into the darkness of the tunnel that opened up before them. Somehow, it looked even less inviting than it had the last time. One after the other, they ducked through the opening. Naruto recognized the smooth, gray walls. Cyanite, Itachi had said. Without thinking, he fell 2 steps behind Owl and Weasel as they took position at his sides. With Owl no longer serving as a barrier between him and the rest of their companions, Naruto felt their eyes more vividly than before. His hand reached for the stone pendant he kept hidden below his shirt, and his fingers brushed over the slight oval bulk dangling from it. Hashirama's acorn tingled under his touch. Naruto would have to tell his uncle everything about this super serious mission later. Surprisingly, or perhaps not, it was this thought that raised his determination. Hashirama, and his grandfather, would get to hear about this in detail, and if Naruto wanted to look good in his own story, he had better ace this. He really wanted to make them proud, and maybe, he might even get another of these tight hugs out of it. The last one had been really nice. Naruto felt a gentle mental nudge, closely followed by Tobarama's voice. Increase your alertness, child. His grandfather sounded serious. I am inside the laboratory now, but we have encountered a problem. The eyes are gone. Gone? Naruto felt his neck prickling at these ominous words. How could this be? They had hidden the entry. How? He asked quickly. I am not sure yet. Tobarama's voice was grim. The seal is still intact. They must have entered through different means. I will make further investigations. Be prepared for a swift response. Got it, Naruto confirmed. He passed a short warning to his bracelet, and saw Owl's hand closing itself tighter around the torch as the leather around his wrist warmed slightly, and pulsed twice in quick succession. Be alert, it said. Weasel showed no reaction, but Naruto felt a single pulsing that he took as a confirmation to his message. Tobarama's eyes scanned the room with watchful urgency, dissecting and assessing every single detail his gaze fell upon. He noticed the tiny scalpel scratches on the spotless metal counters. He smelt the faded biting of disinfectant. He felt the faint air draft coming from the northern side of the room. The air draft. Tobarama furrowed his brows. Why was there an air draft? There was no exit and no ventilation on that side of the lab. Nothing that would explain the strange air circulation. He crossed the room with swift steps and crouched down to inspect the wall. A tiny flame appeared on his hand, and he slowly moved it alongside the wall until it started flickering strongly just an arm's length to his right. Tobarama extinguished the fire and examined the spot that had caused this reaction. His finger traced over an invisible irregularity. He frowned. Kai. The illusion fell and Tobarama saw the cracks running through the wall. It looked as if someone had forcibly broken through it and hastily patched it up again. Presumably, time had been short, so they had tried to cover their poor job with a static genjutsu instead. He phased through the wall and found himself inside a small, dark hole that had been roughly carved into stone, and was just big enough for a grown man to stand inside. Judging by the roughness, it had probably been made by a jutsu. Which meant, Tobarama floated up until his head broke through the ground, and he could see the moon shining above him. He pursed his lips. It was clear now. Someone had opened the ground with an earth jutsu, broken through the laboratory wall, taken the eyes out, and filled the hole up again. It would be impossible to find out where they had been taken. This mission had been authorized far too late. He was about to turn back when his eyes fell on something white. It looked like one of the labels that had been affixed to the jars. Tobarama bent down to pick it up. The name had already been washed out by rain, but under the moon's light, he was just able to decipher it. The vivid memory of a gentle smile flashed through his mind. His chest ached painfully, and he felt another surge of ice-cold fury. They had sworn. Hiruzen had sworn. So, how could this have happened? Were his and his brother's wills so easy to disregard? Jizan, we have arrived at the door now. Did you find anything? Naruto's mental inquiry reached him at the same time. He felt the child's radiant chakra coming from below. It was accompanied by the calm, temperate but piercing signature that belonged to Uchiha Itachi and the steel-hard warmth that was unique to Uchiha Sure. His anger subsided, but still simmered quietly. I have indeed discovered their means, he answered, but the trail leads to the surface. He glanced at the washed-out label in his hand. The last snow had already melted 2 weeks ago, and the last time it had rained was 3 days prior. It is already cold. He could feel Naruto's disappointment over their connection. I will rejoin you to undo the seal, he added. The disappointment turned into happiness. Tobarama smiled at the child's genuine joy. A delicate flame licked gently over the smeared letters, and he offered the blazing name to the winds. You have always abhorred violence, so I will bring you justice instead of revenge. It was hard knowing that you wouldn't find anything and not being allowed to tell anyone about it. Naruto was practically dying to share the news, but that would be a terrible idea. What was he supposed to say? Oh, the ghost of the night aim already took a look and told me we wouldn't find anything there. Yes, that would go down very well. They would either think he was a nutcase or drag him off to some super-secret place to study him. Besides, he had promised his grandfather not to tell anyone. No, he could do nothing but go along with things. Tiger was alert. He understood the importance of this mission. So far, everything had gone smoothly. They had encountered 0 hostiles, and run into an equal number of traps. Tiger had learned through experience that easy never meant anything good. His gaze fell on the tiny child accompanying them. Tiger was not yet sure what to make of the boy. He was small, young, and completely inexperienced. At the same time, he showed an impressive ability in sealing, and shared an almost eerie rapport with Weasel and Owl. Sometimes, it seemed like the child reacted at exactly the same time Weasel or Owl signed. Owl's hand would come up, and Hair would halt before he had fully raised it. They also changed their formation instinctively depending on the narrowness of the tunnel, and Hair always made sure to take the least precarious spot. So far, Blank, who had deliberately positioned himself directly behind the 3 to keep the kid in line, had not had to intervene once. He knew that their leader had been prepared to force the child into obedience if he had proven himself to be rash. But it was completely unnecessary. Hair seemed just as focused as the rest of them. Whoever had taught this kid discipline, they had done a damn good job with him. 1 hidden door away, Tobarama felt a sudden sense of accomplishment. Wolf watched as Hair approached the wall in front of them. According to their briefing, the laboratory's entrance should be here, yet she could not see anything besides stones. This was probably due to the kid's concealment they had heard about. She was curious to see more of his skills. Hair was still standing in front of the wall. Judging by his body language, he was troubled by something. Was something wrong with the seal? Wolf tensed, and she could feel the others tensing up next to her, ready to spring into action at the slightest sign of danger. Then, Hair turned towards Owl and made a sign that translated to above. He seemed disgruntled? She couldn't make head or tail of what it meant, but apparently Owl knew what he wanted. His shoulders shook as he approached Hair, put his arms around his waist, and lifted him up. Wolf blinked. The kid wanted to be picked up. Did he finally submit to his childish urges? But now was not really the best time to ask for a cuddle. Hair pointed at the wall, and Weasel stepped next to the 2 to flash his light at the spot Hair had indicated. Wolf's lips twitched, and she heard cloth rustling next to her as some of her comrades shifted slightly to hide their amusement at this unexpected development. Weasel's eyes spun behind his mask, and he gave a short nod that seemed to satisfy the kid. Hair jumped out of Owl's arms, took 2 steps to the right, and turned towards Blank, rapidly making the signs for speak, safe, and permission. Granted, their commander answered curtly. Report. The noise cancellation is still active, Naruto began, trying his best to ignore the attention on him by focusing on his findings. We cannot be heard inside. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Tobarama walking through the wall. His confidence instantly increased, and his next words came out even more self-assured. Do you want me to undo the concealment now, sir? Go ahead, Blank ordered. Everyone else, take position, and be ready to act should the door open from the inside. Naruto knelt down, and once more unsealed his equipment. As he dipped the brush into the ink pot, Tobarama moved next to him. Do you remember what we practiced? He inquired. You made me draw this 124 times, Naruto reminded his grandfather. He still shuddered whenever he recalled the gigantic paper pile of rejected attempts. I could probably draw it in my sleep now. Good. The ghost watched intently as Naruto's brush danced across the wall with practiced ease, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. But Naruto's strokes were sure and precise that a strand of hair fell into his eye, and he quickly wiped it away with ink-stained knuckles, not noticing the black stripes this action left around the mask's eye hole. It took him 5 minutes to undo the array, but his work paid off when the wall in front of him glowed, and the hidden door materialized in front of their eyes. Next to him, Tobarama nodded once. Well done, Naruto glowed at his praise. Blank took over after that. Naruto had no idea just how rapidly an ANBU raid went until he saw it with his own eyes. He did not even know how he had ended up in the center of their formation, as the masks swarmed the empty laboratory, taking it over in mere seconds. He just knew that he suddenly saw ANBU everywhere he looked. That's kind of cool, and really scary, he told his grandfather, sounding slightly odd. There is a reason they are feared, Tobarama replied simply. You should remember that. His voice turned serious, and Naruto could feel his concern over their link. I know that this looks tempting to you, but do not get involved with them any further than you already are. Once they get a hold of you, there is no turning back. I was the one who founded this division, Naruto. I know how they work. They have already flagged you because they see how deadly you could become if you are trained the right way. Now they will try to slowly assimilate you without you noticing. But this life is not for you, child. It would destroy you. Tobarama's frank honesty dosed him like a bucket of ice water. Shui, Itachi, and Team Ku had only ever been friendly to him, even while wearing their masks, so he had unconsciously identified them with the organization they belonged to. He only now realized how dangerous this assumption had been. It was not the first time. He was deeply thankful that Tobarama was watching over him. He poured all his gratefulness into their link, and felt the ghost's hand resting on his head. Naruto felt protected as he listened to the ANBU reporting to Blank with newfound caution. The laboratory is completely empty, sir. But we found a hole inside the wall. Someone has dug their way inside. Naruto peered in the direction the mask indicated. He could see Weasel and Owl standing before the broken wall and moved to join them. They looked up as he approached, and the three exchanged a look of silent understanding. They would discuss this later. But one thing was clear. They could no longer rely on the Second Hokage. His reaction had been too little, and too late. Chapter 29, Trinity 8. Through no fault of his own, Naruto's first official mission was marked a failure. He was not even sure why this debrief was taking so long. How much was there so say about the eyes are gone that could not be summarized in this very sentence? Yet, he still waited obediently in the room that had been assigned to him until it was his turn to report. Apparently, it was customary in highly sensitive missions that all participants had to report separately to avoid distortion of each other's observations. Since Tobarama was currently in the debriefing room relaying everything he deemed noteworthy, this measure was quite pointless in Naruto's case. Well, they could hardly take precautions against a ghost and their shared connection. He played absently with the acorn around his neck. Prepare yourself, Tobarama's voice sounded over their link. They will call you next. Stay to everything we discussed. Do not acknowledge my presence, and don't give up more information than I need, Naruto finished, slightly amused. He had heard this at least 10 times now. Got it. He jumped from his chair and walked towards the door, reaching it just as it swung open. Naruto looked at the mask standing inside the doorway. Let on, please. Wordlessly, his guide turned and led him down the hallway. The first rays of the morning sun already broke through the window front, leaving bright dots on the floor. After hours of seeing only darkness, the light stung in his eyes, and he averted his gaze. In front of him, the ANBU stopped and knocked on a door. Hair has arrived. The door swung open, and the mask motioned for him to go in. Naruto nodded at him and took a step inside. Thanks. He could feel eyes lingering on his back, before the door closed behind him. Please sit down, Hair. Naruto looked at the two men sitting behind two tables that had been pushed together. He recognized Blank and Nara Shikaku. Tobarama was standing behind them. His eyes flickered through the room, absently counting 2 windows, a wooden crossbeam and 0 adjoining doors. Naruto fully entered the room, walked to the only chair before the tables and sat down. Shikaku's eyes scanned quickly over a paper before they settled on Naruto. Report, he ordered curtly. Naruto took a second to order his thoughts, before he began. When we arrived at the hut at about 0200, nothing seemed unusual. The shack looked exactly as we had left it. Weasel's traps had not been triggered, and the entrance was still secured. I deactivated the Raku array by placing the key, and after coordinating with Blank, Owl, Weasel and I took point. We encountered 0 hostiles on our way to the target area. The lab door was still camouflaged, and the sound barrier was unbroken. After I undid the array, which took about 5 minutes, Blank ordered the raid, and we discovered the hole in the wall. The eyes were all gone. Naruto was proud of the many difficult words in his report. Deciphering Tobarama's lectures really had paid off. Shikaku tapped against the paper. Did you notice anything unusual about this hole? I took a look inside, Naruto replied. The area behind it wasn't very big. Maybe just about the size of a man. The walls looked very rugged. It was completely dark in there, so the entrance got probably closed up again. But there were no cracks to let the moonlight in, so it had likely been sealed with an earth plate made by some jutsu. He paused before adding Tobarama's contribution. I also think that whoever made it must have done it in one go, or they would have fixed the hole properly. Also, they must have had access to a map showing the lab, or they wouldn't have been able to calculate the area so well. And I think they have good chakra control and reserves, or they wouldn't have been able to dig so deeply. Shikaku leaned back and regarded him with an intense look. And what makes you think it was one person, and not multiple? Several people could not have made such a straight line in that time. Besides, it would have taken far too long to remove it piece by piece. Most importantly, however, massive ground movements can always be felt. It would have been too conspicuous to do it bit by bit. But a single tremor after a lightning might have passed for thunder, or a lightning strike in a close vicinity, Tobarama supplied. Thunderstorms always make for a good cover. Naruto repeated his words. Shikaku's eyebrows went up. Well reasoned? We did have a thunderstorm rather recently. 3 nights ago, sir, Naruto offered. Well, for now, he corrected after looking out of the window. That would mean we missed by 4 days, Blank commented. It was the first time he had spoken up. Yes, Shikaku agreed and sighed. Thank you, Herr. Now, it is customary to be given a week's leave irrespective of the outcome. So, use the time to take some rest. I suggest you start by going to bed. At least someone should get a bit of sleep in. The Blank mask turned towards him. Looks like I won't have to punish you this time, kid. Remember that nothing about last night's mission must leak out. So, keep your mouth shut, or you will suffer the consequences. Understood? Yes, Blank, Naruto confirmed. Good. You are dismissed. Naruto stood. An interesting child, Shikaku remarked once the door had closed behind Naruto. Did you notice the way he occasionally changes his pattern of speech? It seems to become more sophisticated when discussing more complex topics. Indeed, Blank agreed. Shikaku side-eyed him. You know the Hokage will not allow it. We have time, Blank answered matter-of-factly. He is still young. Tobarama felt a flash of protective anger and glared at the man through narrowed eyes. He flared a tiny amount of his chakra and felt slightly vindicated when Blank shuddered faintly. Only afterwards did he realize that he had done exactly what Hashirama had always done whenever he had deemed his little brother threatened. Tobarama smiled wryly as he remembered teasing him about this habit. This point goes to you, brother, he whispered softly. Naruto did not go to sleep. Instead, he headed straight for the ledge, where he promptly gave another, much more personal report to the Shodai's tree. Well, actually, it was more of a tale than a report. That really sucks, you know? He grumbled after he had described the empty lab in detail. We went through all this for nothing. The eyes are gone. Really, we should have done this way earlier. Naruto yawned and squinted into the rising sun. He was suddenly feeling very exhausted. I didn't do that much, he mumbled sleepily, but another yawn. I am really, really tired. He curled up between the mighty roots, and his eyes dropped shut. Tobarama found him an hour later, peacefully asleep under a blanket of fallen leaves. He smiled in fondness at the young child, and settled down next to him, lightly flaring his chakra to keep them warm. Tobarama rested his hand on Naruto's head and addressed his brother's memory. I saw her name on one of the labels today, brother. They took Ryo's eyes. Despite the calm, the leaves rustled. Sometimes I remember, he mumbled, this child was always so gentle, and yet we could not keep our oath. He stared into the sun. The light shimmered in front of him, and for a flicker of a second, he thought that he saw his brother's sad face looking back at him from behind a misted veil. Who are you talking about? A tired voice suddenly asked next to him. Tobarama turned his head and saw Naruto moving under his leaf blanket. Blue eyes blinked tiredly at him. A child who was very dear to me, Tobarama replied after a moment of silence. Back when our clans were still enemies, she saved me once. For that, she would probably have paid with her life if Madara had not exercised his authority as clan leader to protect her from their furious kin. But after he betrayed us, her clan turned on her, and my brother and I made her our ward. He brushed a stray strand out of Naruto's eyes. You would have liked each other. She was very gentle and abhorred violence. Naruto glowered. We will get them back, he declared fiercely, your brother's body and her eyes. We'll get them both back. He glared at Tobarama, as if trying to say, you better agree with me now. Tobarama's lips twitched at Naruto's attempt to look imposing because the child was still covered in leaves and reminded him very much of an angry squirrel. Or a hedgehog. We will, he confirmed, and his voice only carried slight laughter. Then he rose. Now back home with you. I still fully intend to give you an intense workout later today, so you better get a few hours of sleep in, Naruto grimaced. Mercy? He asked hopefully, blinking up at the man with wide eyes. No, Tobarama shot him down immediately. Mean, Naruto decided, but stood up anyway. The next day, a very exhausted Naruto walked towards the Senju compound. Tobarama really had not joked about working him hard. He yawned slightly and stopped to let a cart pass that was loaded with fresh vegetables. It was the 5th time he had been forced to wait because of a delivery. Somehow, everyone seemed to be busier than usual. Was some kind of festival coming up? Shrugging to himself, he finally made his way to the clan head's house. Knock, knock. Naruto blinked as he saw the messenger bird in front of the window. Curiously, he put down the sealing book he had been studying and opened the window to let it in. For me? He inquired. The bird nodded. Naruto carefully untied the letter and inspected his unexpected correspondence, half expecting it to be another bill, and mentally made a note to finally send the notice about the allowance cut. But the envelope was heavy and thick, clearly indicating the high quality of the paper. There was a slight bulge to it, and he could hear something moving when he turned it. Naruto stared at the address written on the front of the envelope in ornate strokes. Jizan, he called urgently, there is something you should see. What is it? The ghost demanded as he phased through the wall, alerted by the urgency in Naruto's tone. This, Naruto answered, and held up the letter. It just came with that bird over there. He pointed in the direction of the pigeon that was perched comfortably on the windowsill, preening its feathers. It's addressed to Lord Senju. Should I open it? A glint appeared in Tobarama's eyes. Yes, he agreed. Naruto did not have to be told twice. He opened the envelope and pulled out a single piece of paper. The sun will shine 77. Naruto frowned. What was that supposed to mean? He threw a confused look at the Tobarama. 77? Tobarama's reply came delayed and carried a hint of contemplation. I suppose he is talking about Konoha's 77th founding anniversary. So, that's why everyone is so busy. Naruto exclaimed, they are preparing for the celebration. It is an auspicious number, Tobarama agreed, and likely to be celebrated in a grand way. Which means it will be easier to meet without being noticed. Naruto nodded slowly and turned the envelope over. Something fell out and hit the desk with a metallic clang. It was a golden pin in the shape of a sun. Naruto tilted his head. Am I supposed to wear that? It is probably meant to serve as a means of identification. Tobarama picked it up and turned it between his fingers. His eyes scanned critically over the jeweler, searching for anything that might be amiss. Just as Naruto was wondering whether Tobarama perhaps might want to melt the pin down just to see if there was anything contained in it, the latter handed it back. There is no chakra residue on it, so it should be safe to wear. But I recommend you wait with that until the actual day of the festival. And when is that? Naruto inquired as he tried to reach the shelf by standing on his tiptoes. He huffed when he realized he was still too short to even touch the compartment. In 5 days, Tobarama answered, easily picking up the wooden box Naruto had been aiming for and handed it to the child. Naruto nearly dropped it in surprise. Already? Yes, Tobarama waited until Naruto had stored his pin away before he continued. That is why we will be reviewing formal language intensively over the next few days, and finalize your attire. I will make sure that you will represent us properly. Naruto gulped at the glint in Tobarama's eyes. Author's note. Hello, I am a friend of Flaming Leaf and have been asked to write this. I regret to inform you that Alex, Flaming Leaf, has been seriously ill with me/CFS since a corona infection 2 years ago, and has been bedridden ever since. Alex is too weak to move and cannot tolerate light or noise. There is no improvement in sight, so it is very likely that Alex will not be able to continue writing. A sad thing, since Alex was always happiest spinning stories. I knew Alex loved writing linewalkers, so it's a pretty hard hit to take. The Tumblr site linewalkers.tumblr.com will stay online, so if there are any changes, I will post it there. In Alex's words, please take care of yourselves.